Welcome to Table Talk, the place for deep conversations in the Geekverse. And trust me, when we tear into a subject, we go deep. I'm Heath, and I'll be your host. Each episode, I'll be talking with one or more creators, authors, illustrators, publishers, or other movers and shakers in games, TV, books, movies, or other areas of the Geekverse. Regular guests include Douglas A. Burton, the author of Faraway Bird, a multi-award-winning historical fiction novel of the Byzantine Empress Theodora. He's also the author of The Heroine's Labyrinth, an alternative story structure to the hero's journey that often occurs in stories with feminine heroes. That structural framework frequently comes up in our analysis of story. Brianna De Silva, she's the director and co-writer of The Cultists, a Lovecraftian comedy mockumentary-style web show here on YouTube, and the author of The City of Reckoning, an epic fantasy novel of political intrigue, the ethics of war, and young love. Kamran Pasha is a screenwriter, director, novelist, and was a writer and producer on the series Kings, a producer on NBC's Bionic Woman, and a co-producer and writer for Sleeper Cell. He's also written for the CW series Nikita and Roswell, New Mexico. He's been breaking news from inside Lucasfilm, Disney, and Hollywood. His analysis and commentary have become very popular on YouTube. We regularly meet to discuss and analyze stories, and when we do, we dive into graduate-level seminars on story structure and writing. Come on in and let's go deep. And when I say we're going deep, I mean you'd better bring your hard suit. Other guests have included Lou Anders, the author of the Thrones and Bones fantasy novels Once Upon a Unicorn, the creator and publisher of the Norengard RPG, and the author of Star Wars: A Pirate's Price, the book that explains why the Millennium Falcon is on the planet Batu at Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. Mark Tassin, the creator of the World of Ataltis, head of Mechanical Muse, former director of the Gen Con Writers Symposium, and the head developer of the new Cool Name RPG. Let's see, who else?
Bond. James Bond.
Well, not James Bond. Not yet. Maybe soon, though. But I have interviewed Jamie Stegmaier, the founder of Stonemaier Games, crowdfunder extraordinaire, and publisher of many hit board games like Scythe and Wingspan. Ryan Colin, sculptor of the world of Revelo Monster Busts, and the creator of the Vast Grim Dark Horror RPG. Ajit George, the Dungeons & Dragons author. We talked about game writing, education, and his contribution to Van Richter's Guide to Ravenloft and the development of the Journeys to the Radiant Citadel.
I am Hela, Odin's firstborn, commander of the legions of Asgard, the rightful heir to the throne and the goddess of death.
Well, actually, that interview got rather spicy, so I think I'd better just keep that one to myself. Kate Wilson, a YouTuber, actress, host, and prolific geek guru who's now working to make a new show dedicated to the world of tabletop gaming a reality. So buckle up and get ready for a wild ride, because it's time to explore the worlds of tabletop gaming, sci-fi, fantasy, and all of geekdom through the eyes of those who are making things happen.
Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed.
Roger, ready to move out.
It's time for Table Talk. Hello, everyone. Good evening. I hope you are doing very well. I am very excited about tonight's discussion. Welcome to my home. Welcome to the office. Welcome to Table Talk, a very cold office. Hope you're doing well and hope you're staying warm. I'm down here in Alabama and everybody is out of kerosene. There is not like a quart of kerosene within like 300 miles of where I am. So it's cold here. So hopefully everybody's doing great. But tonight we are going to be talking about The Heroine's Labyrinth with Douglas A. Burton. Doug is a regular here on the show and he is very popular with us all. His book, The Heroine's Labyrinth, is coming out here next month. So we're talking about a whole bunch of things that have to do with his book and feminine heroes and women in storytelling. So first, let's welcome Douglas A. Burton. Hey, Doug.
Hey, everybody. How you doing?
Welcome. This is your time to be in the spotlight.
I guess so. That's awesome.
Right. And then also tonight, we have to discuss this subject with another major favorite on the channel and across all of YouTube, Kamran Pasha. Welcome, Kamran.
I don't know about all of YouTube, but I'm happy to be a favorite here. I'll take that.
A cross section, at least.
It is fantastic to have you both here tonight. I'm really excited about this conversation. And to everybody in the chat, we got a whole group here in the chat, whole crew here in the chat. This is wonderful.
Yeah, and speaking of labyrinths, Heath, you cannot end up like Jack Torrance in the middle of that maze of The Shining. he didn't in the cold. He froze to death in the middle of that labyrinth.
I'm trying to prevent that over here. I'm trying to prevent
Good.
that over here. All right. We need to get into it. I think we should get straight into what's going on here. So, Doug, do you want to first describe the Heroine's Labyrinth, what your book is, and give us an introduction to this? We've done a lot of discussion on this on the channel before. We've been re-releasing this on the Table Talk channel. But if people are coming in new, what is the Heroine's Labyrinth, and what are you creating?
So, like most writers, I started understanding story structure with the hero's journey. I think I had some preliminary understanding of a 3-act structure. I think some things stretch it out to a 5-act structure, the rise, the climax, the basic components of story structure. I studied, completely amateur, didn't even know how to apply it. I would just understand it conceptually. Then I would start writing, and it had nothing to do with story structure at all. And then I got really focused on the hero's journey, which I loved. And I loved sitting down, I think, really since the 90s, studying the hero's journey specifically. I would sit with a laptop or even a notebook pad in my lap. I would watch movies, and I'd look for certain things. I'd hit pause. I'd write it down. And I couldn't believe how recurrent certain themes from the hero's journey were in stories. And so I have this vast index, I guess you would call it, of notes for the hero's journey. And I loved it. I got several books on the hero's journey, including Campbell's, which is very hard to read, by the way. The Hero with 1,000 Faces, very difficult.
It's a scholarly book. It's a scholarly book. It's a scholarly book. It's meant for academics. And the funny thing is, because I was a religion major in college, and in my senior thesis defense, I referenced that, and everyone all became very tense because scholars don't want to. They see that as poo-poo popular writing. I'm like, popular writing? Oh, really? Nobody can understand that book.
Yeah, it's amazing because sometimes I'd be reading this universally understood concept today, and I was like, how did they even get this concept out of what he wrote? It doesn't even sound like he's talking about some of the things he's talking about. So anyway, it was a very difficult book. So I had all these notes, and I've attempted to write for a long, long time, over almost 2 decades, actually going all the way back to 6th grade, really. But it's hard. It's hard to use story structure effectively unless you practice a lot. So when I started writing my what eventually became my debut novel, I fully intended to use the hero's journey. I structured out my story. I laid it out. It seemed to make sense. And of course, Cameron, I'm sure when you start writing the story, you can often go in a direction you don't intend it. Characters start behaving differently. And the hero's journey quickly broke down about a third into the story. And I was like, oh, no problem. I'll just find the feminine version of the hero's journey. And that is like opening Pandora's box, because everyone has something to say about this. There's a lot of treatises on this. There are other theories on this. A lot of it is there's a lot of feminist literary criticism. There is good-hearted, attempts to address this, but none of them really gave me the nice, easy, concise, usable structure that the hero's journey gave me. And some of the things, it was hard to apply. It sounds like some things only seem to apply to romance novels, for example, and I couldn't figure out how to apply it in these other settings. And a lot of them, they might address an action movie, but they didn't address like literature, like from the 18th century, where heroines aren't going anywhere. They're just staying in their home in some cases. So anyway, I began to watch all my favorite movies again. Then I started watching all the movies I needed to watch where the hero as the lead. I began rereading novels from across the board. This took a total of 5 years of just constant, consuming of this to study. And the notes I took to help me write The Faraway Bird, I thought became really something distinctive from the hero's journey, which I still love. I'm not anti-hero's journey. Another thing that's a little different, a lot of people that promote heroine-centric stories or heroine-centric storytelling, sometimes they bash the hero's journey, and I think unfairly. So this book, the Heroine's Labyrinth, is my best effort to lay out what I think is an alternative model that holds up on an archetypal level across a broad spectrum of heroine-centric stories. And while it may be feminine in its dynamism, it is also transcendent of gender. There are several stories, big ones, that have males as the lead, and they follow the heroine's labyrinth. Rambo, Fight Club, The Game with Michael Douglas is another. So there's a bunch. Batman A lot of these stories will also follow the heroine's labyrinth, even though it's a male.
And we maybe at some point over to today's conversation, we'll explore why that is. My instinct, just off the top of my head, my instinct is because those are journeys, even though they're with male heroes, masculine heroes, those are journeys that are psychological journeys. And I think that much of what the genius of what you've uncovered here is a psychological journey, right? And we can talk about that.
Well, you actually pointed out, Cameron, I used a certain image of a maze called the Chakra Viewer. It's a maze made in India. It's a beautiful looking maze, and it's a very specific one. Funny enough, doing my research, I didn't realize how many spirals and mazes there were, like specific ones. And the Chakra Viewer is interesting because, like I said, it's an asymmetrical but beautiful pattern. And Cameron noted that it also looks like the human brain. And it never left my head that a maze is quite obviously, once he said it, also a metaphor for human psychology. And so I think that there's a massive crossover. I think what you said is correct. A massive crossover between the intricacies of a native culture, social rules, and some of the things that you might deal with without going out on a massive adventure, and human psychology. Very subtle and cerebral issues that cause conflicts and drive dramatic incidents in chapters and scenes. So I think that's an incredible observation, and you helped me see that.
Well, and I want to actually say that I had the incredible privilege of reading an early draft of this book. Douglas, a member of my Patreon, he asked me to look at it as sort of a formal consult, and people send me screenplays, they send me books. And this is the first time I've been asked to look at really something that wasn't a story, but about storytelling. It was essentially, it was, I wouldn't say an academic work, but it's an analytical work, right? And so I said, sure, I'll take a look at it. And, I'll be honest with you, I was just blown away. I was like, what is this thing? I mean, this is a work of genius, and he's uncovered something that intuitively feels right. I mean, I gave you a few critiques and a few tweaks here and there, but basically I said, this thesis is right, and I've never seen this thesis ever presented in this form. And I said, you've just opened up a new conversation about storytelling, which hasn't happened in decades. And I'm not exaggerating here. This book has changed how I perceive, and I primarily write female heroines. I have multiple novels published with them. My screenplays largely are female-led. And I realized that I was following this pattern unconsciously without realizing it.
Unconsciously, exactly. That's the beauty of it. And by the way, I am a member of Cameron's Patreon and a proud member of it. And Cameron, I knew that if I was way off in some ditch somewhere, he would be the guy to tell me, because quite honestly, strict, honest, blunt feedback is very hard to come by. And I knew Cameron was going to give me that, and he did. But when he said some other things too that were very complimentary, and it really boosted my confidence in following through with this all the way. So anyway, so for that, I thank you, by the way.
Well, I want to point out that, we have talked about also on this channel and in these discussions quite a bit, the difference between masculine and feminine and male and female. So we've talked, when we've been analyzing stories, we've talked about a lot, like hero stories that actually have men in them that are following a heroine's journey, and then also stories that are female centric, but are following a masculine story structure and things. So we mix all of that up here as well. So that's all we've talked about. That,
and that's authentic. Unfortunately, these terms have become politicized in the last 5 years. But prior to that, people were aware, or at least maybe other cultures were aware, that there is a masculine and a feminine polarity of energy, and there are certain attributes that come within that energy, and that people within a physical body with different genitalia can express different aspects of that range of energies. It's been a bizarre conversation for the last decade over it, but I'm glad we can talk about it in an intelligent fashion here.
Yeah, and I agree with you. One of my initial worries was that because there was any sort of heroine or gender related words at all, that this would be rejected. But I think in reality, there are feminine and masculine energies out there. And I also think that there are several things that are transcendent of that as well. So I think we should be fine.
Rochelle is asking, you have this book available for us? This is coming out next month.
Next month, it's going to be available for pre-order, and I think there's going to be a special launch date. We put on March 26th, but it will be available in February for ordering. And honestly, I can't wait. I really can't wait. I've worked so hard on this, almost obsessively so.
And what platforms? What platforms should we be able to buy it on?
Well, right now it'll be available like Amazon.com. So like I think I haven't worked on a hardcover book yet, but right now it's going to be available as a paperback. It will be in color. So one of the things I'm super proud of is we had an artist design tarot cards.
I remember you talking you were going to do that.
Yes, we did it, and they came out beautiful. So one of the things that always bothered me about structure in general is how rigid it is. And I noticed when I was in classes, people would always ask the same questions. And it's like, well, can you ever break the rules? And the answer is always yes, but try not to start there, right?
You got to master the rules. If I may just interrupt for a second, I remember teaching a class once on screenwriting at U Chicago. It wasn't a class. It was a weekend seminar. I was asked to come and speak. And after I gave my methodology, which you've seen, my method for doing storytelling, Heath knows it well. A young kid in the class is like, I don't need any of this structure. I can start without it. I'm like, no, you can't, because you don't understand it. You can transcend it when you understand it, and then you know what you're picking and leaving. But you can't just make it up as you go along. You learn the hard way when you do.
Yeah, you'll learn the hard way. Yeah, I learned the hard way. Now I wouldn't say that I didn't wave anything off. I just didn't know how to use it. So I was like, I'm just going to forge ahead. I wrote 500 pages of a novel, and I was like, I need to start developing the main idea. And I was like, okay. And it was like, oh my God, I didn't set any of it up. I didn't set anything up. I just wrote 500 pages of what I would call logical stuff. Like the next step would be this, then the next step would be this. And you just go out into the woods and you're lost. So I learned the hard way that like, hey, you think you're a great artist? No, you're not. You're going to have to learn the rules. And I still strongly advocate the rules. I think knowing when to break the rules shouldn't be an all the time thing anyway. There's a reason why these guidelines and rules and principles have stood the test of time, and you'd be smart to follow them. So anyway, I forgot how I got there, but
I was also
when we're talking about your tarot cards. We're talking about you've got these color tarot cards.
Oh, right. So structure, I was always bothered by that, and it seemed like everybody seemed thrown off by it, and all the questions revolved around how to follow structure, when to break structure, how to be conventional, when to be unconventional, and of course you have the pure artist mentality of I do anything. I just throw it out there, and every now and then you run into someone who could do that. But for most people, that's not going to be the case. So I wanted to approach structure differently, and I got the idea watching someone do a tarot reading. There's an arrangement of the cards, which is a structure. But what's beautiful about it is that you lay out the structure, and then the structure falls to the background. And as you turn cards, you're instantly met with this archetypal imagery, which you must, as the tarot reader, interpret. And I'm like, that's kind of how it is to write a story. You're getting images from your own psyche, which is fed by outside images and other stories you've read, but you're interpreting them and then trying to interpret and explain them in your own story. So I was like, I'm going to approach structure from this standpoint. I think it's a more intuitive structure, but it's not anti-structure either.
Well, that's why the tarot was so important, because I do read tarot cards. I'm not an expert on it by any means, but I collect them. I've trained a little bit in it, and and they are very effective forms of divination. But what it is exactly what you're describing. It's intuitionally based. You are interacting with the cards, and you're finding the meaning. You are doing. It's a process, right? The cards aren't telling you anything. You are interacting with the images and the general understandings, the range of ideas the cards have, and you will create a story of what this means divination-wise. And they're very and since we're talking about feminine energies, one of the attributes of the feminine is arguably intuition, the woman's intuition, the feminine intuition, right? And so that's why when you said that, I was like, that's genius. That's exactly what you need in a book about the feminine, storytelling, because it's intuitional.
Yeah, when Cameron mentioned he was really I think you said you collected decks and everything, correct? I was like, I went to the right guy.
I'm going to show you my favorite one. You guys keep talking. I'm going to show you my favorite one.
Okay.
Well, I was going to say, why he's bringing that up, I was going to say that when Doug was talking about the psychology and the discovery of this, it's been a theme on this channel as we study story and talk about archetypes and all of that as well, that we are discovering things. The hypothesis that we've kind of been operating on, many of us have been, is that these things are kind of embedded in our psyche, and we are discovering them, and that's why they are universal, and we see them over and over again, and they're part of humanity. That's kind of the hypothesis that a lot of us have been working on.
Well, and that's what was important. Oh, go ahead.
No, I interrupted you. Go ahead. That's important to interrupt. And then
I
I'll
was
show
just
you.
going to say that was important to me that I've read a lot of books on heroine storytelling or feminine storytelling. And one of the problems I feel like it was that the authors sometimes tried to tell us what it should be. And I was like, man, that's not what Campbell
mansplaining. It's mansplaining. That's what it is.
It is. Well, but I was like, that's not what Campbell did. He wasn't telling us what we should do with heroes. He's like, this is what is out there. This is what has been told, and I'm going to organize it. So this isn't my idea. This is just my articulation of something that has happened recurrently, subconsciously, on a wide spectrum of stories.
All right. So now I'm going to mansplain my favorite tarot deck, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It's this. And it's not an easy deck to get anymore. Tarot of Eternal Night.
Hold on. Let me solo you, Cameron. Sorry. Let me solo you.
You want to solo me? This Tarot of Eternal Vampires Eternal Night Tarot. And I'm going to show you just a few images how incredible it is. I think it's probably using some kind of AI visuals, but it's really stunning. So here's the Fool. Here's the Fool. Look at that. And they're all these vampiric archetypal imagery, you know. The Magician, right? It just it flips it, and so you've got the High Priestess, right? And it's all vampiric, stunning imagery. Actually, one of my favorites is probably the Lovers. Let's see if we can pull that one up here. Yeah, so this is great. This is the Lovers. Right? So I mean, it's sexy, it's dangerous, it's vampires, right? But again, vampires represent the dark side of the psyche, and so they're absolutely. And so that's what fascinates me about the reason I collect tarot cards is that they're all different ways to exploring these structures of our mind. That's what they are, and that's what you're exploring. And I believe there's a question in the chat, which I actually asked you when you told me you were going to do it. Can we purchase these tarot decks? Because yes, I will buy them too. So can we, Doug? What's the plan?
Not yet. I can't afford that part yet, but I do plan on taking whatever I make from the book and plugging it into that because I have to do the tarot cards. I just have to. You have to know your limitations too.
Because there is a market for them. Let's get your book flowing. Let's get it out there because there's absolutely a market for these tarot cards. You have some visuals you can share with us from the book. Are you going to share with them on today's broadcast?
I totally can. They came out great. And I even noticed when I went to Barnes and Noble, there used to be like one or two tarot decks on like a table. Now there's an entire display. And now there's 3 displays, and they're loaded with and I love books, so I love just walking around in a bookstore and just looking at Now I want to spend some time and go through those tarot decks, like Cameron just showed. Just looking at the artwork, inspires creativity. It's amazing. So you're right. There's a total demand for it.
Do you want to show? You want to show this video that you made, Doug?
Oh, okay. So yes,
everything.
I made a video obsessively that tried to explain what the Labyrinth is as distinctive from a linear outward hero's journey. So I strung it together, and it was important to use actual imagery to show, just to show how unconsciously the Labyrinth images are projected into our films in these heroine-centric stories. And it is stunning. And the more I looked, the more I found. So I was finally able to string it all together to kind of show just how prevalent the Labyrinth is as a storytelling device or a storytelling framework.
Okay, so you sent it to me, so I'm going to play it right now. I'll leave us up on the screen, but I'll play this this video. So here we go.
Okay.
Okay, let me reload it. That happens.
It was
all
just
the
a black
time.
screen.
I get it prepped, and then I have to reload it.
Well, it's the Emperor's New Clothes. Wasn't that a brilliant video? Well, only geniuses can see it. That
was a fantastic.
If you're a good writer, you would see it.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Every point in our lives, we have the power to choose our own path. The goddesses guide us at every step toward service and truth, as though toward the center of a great spiral.
The Labyrinth. What is it? We see its symbolism everywhere. A spiral, a maze, a grid. But in terms of writing fiction, the Labyrinth is a narrative construct, a vast inner world of the heroine's own native culture. She is surrounded by people she knows, people who are familiar to her, people who may be dangerous, possible friends or foes. Hers is not an exotic journey outward, but rather an inward journey on the roads and alleyways, the hallways and passageways of her own home culture. Most of the conflicts that the heroine runs into will be amongst people she knows, in social settings, in familiar environments. And like any labyrinth, it is designed for freedom of movement, but to keep the inhabitant inside. In numerous heroine-centric stories, the heroine often feels trapped or confined or repressed in some way, shape, or form by the native culture itself. She often experiences pressures or challenges from within the home, from family members, people who have an interest with a continuity of something in the culture itself. She may be wary of traps, those who seek to capture, convert, or possess the heroine for entirely selfish reasons. The heroine often has dreams or aspirations that may be in conflict with the native culture, a secret identity or something that she wishes to pursue that the native culture discourages. Or she may discover that her exploration of these inner worlds uncovers secrets or something dangerous to her. Or others. There are many trapdoors or hidden doors. Things are never as they seem inside the labyrinth. It can be confusing. Even in numerous journeys where the heroine appears to go on a fantastic or exotic journey, in reality, the journey is a material manifestation of the home world itself. A fantastic reimagining of the heroine's home life. Oftentimes, there is a maze hidden just outside her window, and many times with game-like rules where you can win or lose. So many great works of literature depict a heroine navigating the dangers and pitfalls of her own native culture. But we see this manifested in reality in the material world in so many heroine-centric stories. The maze becomes real, a material symbol of this exact conflict. And we see these subconscious projections repeating themselves in stories. Things like the secret door in which the heroine discovers a secret entry into a large world right in the heroine's backyard, or oftentimes hidden inside the house. It's fascinating to see these recurrent themes repeating in our stories. In most of these stories, the heroine is not a warrior. She's a regular person like you and me. And the most extraordinary things are just behind the mundane and commonplace. Usually, in Act 1 of the story, heroines are simply seeking greater autonomy, greater individuation in a world they don't fully understand yet. So many heroines seek truth and answers and are willing to tumble down the rabbit hole to get them. But there are authority figures and trusted guardians, friends, and family. Trust is a rare commodity in heroine-centric stories, and often the labyrinth itself becomes confusing as the heroine is redirected or misdirected by members of the native culture. And it is this world that the heroine learns to navigate carefully. It is not linear, but multi-directional, non-linear, and asymmetrical. The labyrinth may even symbolize the human psyche itself, a roadmap for the human condition. It could be the city in which the heroine lives, a woman on a game board, set to navigate rules, traditions, gender roles, or any other expectations that are preset. However, although the labyrinth may seem to be a mental or physical prison, the heroine does intend to break through. She intends to escape. In fact, in many heroine-centric stories, the confining or restrictive symbolism of the labyrinth actually represent a real push toward freedom. How many of our stories depict heroines in labyrinthine imagery desperately trying to make their escape? Whether we are talking about mythology, folk tales, or modern storytelling, there is something visceral that resonates with these heroines. This desperate push for freedom is an inherent human impulse that speaks to all of us. These heroines are modeling a way out, almost like an obstacle course in which movement forward is the key while solving intricate puzzles, challenges, and evading danger. The archetypal design of the labyrinth is timeless. It's embedded in the human psyche, and we will always recognize it, and we will always respond with it. And many heroines fight back, whether or not they are trained as a warrior.
Doug, that was a fantastic video. I thought you lined up the imagery and everything to make your point very well across all of these stories.
I mean, I don't know, how long did you spend editing that damn thing together? It looks like you went through 700 films.
Well, well, over the last several years, I have. So I have this this format that I have to be able to recall information as quickly as possible. So I'll go through it and then I'll try to find, and I have them all in my head. So I'll be like, okay, there's a labyrinth in that movie. And then sometimes you speculate. I'm like, I can't remember if there is, and I'll look for it. And then there it is. It's waiting for me. So I would just grab all these screen grabs and then string them together as needed for that. So and there's other heroines I wish I squeezed in there.
Well, you squeeze a lot in. So, look, it's brilliant. I'm glad you put in my favorite movie of 2024, Barbie, in there, and it's good. It's good to see Labyrinth was central to it. In fact,
Yes.
the whole journey in and out of Barbie Land is a labyrinth and all that, right? But it is great. But, I mean, if I can give you two things to consider if you want to keep doing versions of this.
Absolutely.
One is it cuts a little abruptly. I think you need a more of a conclusive ending, right? Currently just ends like, oh, it's over now, right? It didn't build to an ending of your presentation. The presentation itself is brilliant. I think you just need to go back to the, tell us what you're going to say it, and then remind us what you said. So you've told us what you're going to say, you said it, you didn't quite conclude with, and this was what we learned, right? Okay, you have
that's a great point.
Conclusive. It just stopped mid-sentence or mid-flow. The other thing I would suggest to think about is have a woman do the voiceover. And you know what? Have a British woman do the voiceover. Because we associate the British accent with masterpiece theater narration of
Totally.
Have a British woman do
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I told Doug we could work on the beginning and the end, actually, if we were to put this out as an independent video, which I think he totally should. But we also need to actually mention the Heroine Labyrinth book and put his name up there so that people know where this come from.
Yeah, exactly. He's got it. Look, I got my little Patreon right there on my little thing, so I don't even see it, right? So, I actually want to give you somebody. I don't know that she would ever agree to it, but I'm gonna. There's a friend of mine who I'm developing a movie with, who has a hugely successful podcast, who's British and has a masterpiece theater voice. Her name is Laura Roughton, and she has this very popular YouTube podcast called The Paranormal Scholar. So if she just
tells, her already.
She's a scholar. She's a Cambridge graduate who tells great stories of true ghost stories going back hundreds of years, and she recites them in this very British masterpiece theater. Sip a cup of tea, feel very creepy. She's got this brilliant, soothing British voice. So I'm going to throw it in the private chat and the thing. Go to her channel, and if you want, I can introduce you. She may say I don't do that, but
sure.
I would pay her like a couple $100 and have her recite this thing, because her voice is literally like it's like PBE. It's like watching PBS in 1985 with Masterpiece Theater with an elegant British woman reciting this profound thing.
Oh my God, I'm superimposing what you're describing in my head, and that would be amazing if it was narrated by a woman. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. So I'm gonna throw it in there, and I'll throw it in. People should also check out that channel while staying here. So yeah, I'll throw it in there.
And welcome to everybody in the chat. We have a fantastic crew here. I see lots of new people in the chat. Welcome to everybody who is here. It is great. So yes, I think that's fantastic, Doug. But yeah, we can step it up. We can even step it up a few notches here.
I agree. I would love to step it up.
I see people playing that in elementary school, or not elementary, well, maybe elementary, but grade schools. That's where I was looking for, like grade school, high school, stuff like that, class stuff like that. Also in college, I see people putting that here. I think that Doug really has something with the Heroine's Labyrinth here as well, and that's something that people are going to find over the coming months and years, and is really going to be a big thing. So, it's I think people are going to find it, and people for the right audience, people are just going to love it, and it's going to blow up. But do you want to, in that case, Doug, you have breaking news actually tonight as well. There's fantastic and huge news regarding this book. Do you want to let everybody know what that is?
Yes. So I've been looking for endorsements out there, and Kamran Pasha, thankfully, thank you, has endorsed the book. In fact, he was the first.
But that's not the breaking news.
That's not the breaking news, but it matters to me who was the first to say, I like this idea. That matters to me a lot. However, there is, I sent out some specific people, and of all the people that responded, Christopher Vogler, who wrote The Writer's Journey, endorsed the book. And Christopher Vogler, thank you. Christopher Vogler, I consider one of the big three in bringing the hero's journey out into the world. You had Joseph Campbell in 1949 with his book. You had George Lucas with Star Wars in 1977. And then you had Christopher Vogler with his, at first screenwriting memo, and then he turned it into the writer's journey book. And this is the book that made, I think, the hero's journey accessible to everyone. And notice what's on the cover. A maze.
So almost like this was the prequel to what was coming with you.
Yeah. Yes. In fact, there are things that I think he was already picking up on himself that he was, like I was, trying to see through the lens of the hero's journey, or just saying there's also these other archetypes. Christopher, his endorsement was pretty huge. He said, and I'll just read it.
Give it to us.
He said, "The Heroine's Labyrinth offers something greatly needed in the world of storytelling, a key to the special conditions and unique logic of the heroine's journey that will be game-changing for writers. Through careful analysis of a multitude of popular stories featuring female protagonists, Douglas Burton has cracked the code and made it accessible. He shows convincingly that the heroine's journey is distinctly different, motivated by different needs and drives, but still compatible with the masculine-centered hero's journey. Especially useful are the summaries of his findings at the end of each chapter, giving solid principles for building emotionally satisfying adventures that put women in the driver's seat."
I mean, that's not a blurb. That's a full-scale endorsement. That's not a one sentence. Because I know authors who they'll give you one sentence, compelling work, great reading, and that's it, right? And that but that's like you could put that in the back of your book as a major like blurb that people see.
Yeah, I personally thanked him this morning, obviously, and I was like, man, you went above and beyond. And the fact that he's willing to do that for a newcomer like me, that speaks volumes. So, I'll never forget it, going that extra mile. So anyway, I was really excited. It kind of blew my mind, and I was very excited to share this information, obviously. So
I got Doug's text at like 6:30 in the morning. Like, oh my God, Vogler just endorsed the book.
Look, I had the same reaction when my first novel, Mother of the Believers, was being put out by my publisher. I didn't know that anyone was going to endorse it. I ended up getting a lot of endorsements, so it shocked me. And then I had two shocking moments. One was the big one, which is on the front cover of my novel, Amy Tan. The Joy Luck Club, right? One of the greatest novelists of the last generation, right? And she read my book, and she gave me a simple. All she didn't say was this: a epic and intimate, a beautiful story. That's all she didn't say, and that was enough. It was on the cover, right? And then the other one was similar to what you just had with Christopher Vogler. Was so the author that had really inspired me to push to try to write my own novel is a gentleman named Stephen Pressfield, who wrote Gates of Fire. Right, which is one of the great epic. He wrote. That's the story of the 300 before that movie, the 300 was made. But it was about the soldiers of Thermopylae, right?
Yes.
And so the Gates of Fire. So Stephen
One of
Pressfield.
my favorite books of all time.
It's incredible, and
we're going to talk about it.
It's a superb book. And the battle sequences are so compelling. Actually, somewhat I mimicked them in the battle sequences of my novels because I was like, you ain't going to get better than this. So learn from how he used language to describe it, right? And so he had inspired me, and I've been reading his book. And then my publisher, Simon & Schuster, came back to me and said, so we just got word that Stephen Pressfield will endorse your novel. And I couldn't believe this. Then I discovered the other thing. Stephen Pressfield lives down the street from me. He lives like half a mile from me. So I was like, yeah. And so I asked publisher, can I get his email? And they're like, yeah. And I emailed him, and then we've had several coffees in this area. And now this person who was my icon, and I wouldn't say I'm his close friend. I would still consider myself a mentee of a mentor, right? But that threshold has been crossed, and he blurred my second novel as well. And so I understand the incredible feeling that you get when someone who is an iconic hero for you, and Vogler is an iconic hero for all writers. I used his book in my screenwriting class at Penn State last year, right? And so it's incredible. So this isn't a small thing. I don't think he's out there endorsing everybody. I don't think he does that.
I think the heroine's journey is kind of hard to get a hold of. I think the heroine's labyrinth is going to be sitting next to the writer's journey on many people's bookshelves in the country.
Well, that's my intention. I intend to send copies of this to those professors I met at Penn State, saying I think you guys need to be sharing this with the class.
Oh, man.
And if I ever teach another class, I intend to bring that in there.
Now, it's true. Sable also brings up I do a morning show at 9:30 a.m. every day called The Morning Grind. And we've started a tradition where we read a passage from Pressfield's work every single morning. We do deep breathing. Then we take a sip of our coffee or other drink that we've got, and then we read a passage from. We went through the War of Art, and now we're going through Turning Pro. So we've actually incorporated. I said that if I were going to start a religion, if I were going to do that, resistance and Stephen Pressfield's idea of resistance in the War of Art would replace the idea of sin. So we've incorporated a ritual involving Stephen Pressfield and his work.
There's a synchronicity in that. Well, what's interesting is Pressfield is actually a spiritual person. I mean, he is a believer, right? Yeah, right. And he gets his endorsement in the War of Art from Robert McKee, who's a very stubborn, sort of grouchy atheist. And his whole endorsement was like, well, this is a great book, but I'm really uncomfortable with references to spirituality. I was like, dude, why put that in the endorsement? He couldn't.
Why would you write
couldn't say, I don't believe in God, and Stephen's making me endorse his book. It's really good. He keeps referencing spirituality, and I was like, stop, Robert. Just stop.
We're gonna cut that out of the blurb,
but it was in the blurb.
That's where you put the ellipses. There's some ellipses.
So I just want to share. Then we get back to Douglas's wonderful accomplishment, but just an example of what artists don't recognize how influential they are. Stephen doesn't know how influential he is, so he really doesn't. He doesn't understand it, and so I was taking a writer, director, and whatever. I take acting classes to really connect with actors. So I was taking an acting class, and the acting teacher was just mentioning, everyone should read The War of Art as a book to inspire you as an artist. And I said, yeah, no, I know Steven. And they thought I was just like, everyone in Hollywood's like, I know Steven Spielberg. Right? I was like, no, Steven's, I know him. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I was like, no, I know Stephen Pressfield. I mean, I've had coffee with him like 4 times. I know him, right? And they're like, yeah. So I emailed Steven. I was like, they're using your book in my acting class. Would you like to come and speak in the acting class? Man. He's like, really? They're using my book in an acting class? Sure. So I had connect Steven with the owner of the acting studio, and he's like, Stephen Pressfield just emailed me. So we bring him into the class, and it's like celebrity. It's like Mark Twain has come in, right? And I became a hero because this guy knows Stephen Pressfield. It's like that scene in Shazam where you know Superman. So he really does know Superman, right? And so, but that's the thing, is he had no idea. Stephen doesn't know that he's influenced tens of millions of artists. He doesn't know.
That's amazing. And Cameron, have you read The War of Art?
Yeah, I have a copy on my desk. You need to reread that every few weeks as an artist.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't read it yet. It sounds like that's a must.
What it is, it's the ultimate kick in the butt. What it does is forces you to get up and write. I mean, if there's anything in the world, it forces you to overcome procrastination. I've never seen anything magical like that, because that's every writer's. There should be a book on the nature, but that's The War of Art. The entire book is about the nature of why we procrastinate, and the idea of resistance, that there's almost like a negative spiritual energy that wants to make sure creativity is not born into the world. And he uses archetypes. It's almost like a demon, right? And so he encapsulates it in that language, which made McKee uncomfortable. But he views it as an actual entity, a demonic entity, if you will, that tries to prevent us from giving the gift of creativity to the world. It's an incredible book.
Yeah. Resistance is everything that prevents you from becoming everything that you can be.
Yeah.
Whatever you are supposed to be in the world, resistance is everything that stands in your way to achieving that and wants to prevent you from doing that. And it's all about combating that. And he couches it often in military terms. You're going to war against this force and you have to fight the battle every day to become everything that you can be, especially in the creative realm, but in general, everything that you can be.
Yeah. So and the genius of the book.
Willpower. I'm sorry, what?
Exactly. And the genius of the book. Yes, it is martial willpower. The genius of the book is this. Every chapter is one paragraph. You open it up, it's 3 sentences that kick you in the ass. That's chapter 1. Turn the page. Chapter 2. 3 sentences that kick you in the ass, make you want to write. I mean, that's all it is. That's the genius of it, is that as a writer, you procrastinate. So he's like, you got no reason to procrastinate. Open the book.
You get 1 or 2 lines.
Right. Yeah, you get 3 lines. And that's enough to make you get up and write that day, right?
That's why I chose to use that for the morning grind. That's why we read in the morning grind, because it's written like that. There's just sometimes it's a paragraph, but everyone is just a chunk. It's a small chunk. That way, every morning we breathe, we take our sip, and we read one passage, because he couches it in one passage. And then
so this is not a book you would want to get on audio. This is one you want to hold, right?
You can get it on audio.
Because I have it on audio. I haven't read it yet, but it sounds like it'd be nice to just have it and open it. And
well, I mean, there's something sacred to me about a physical book. I don't do audiobooks, right? There's something sacred. 3-minute fit book. But either way, if it works for you audio, it's about the message. Because again, you'll put the message in chapter 1 audio. Well, 30 seconds later, chapter 2. So it's gonna be. I think it might work better to read that book as a book.
Have you ever heard of The Artist's Way? It's an older book. I think it was written in the 90s. Julia Cameron, yeah. And that was the first time I had encountered a book that treated creativity and the expression and the execution of creativity as like a sacred endeavor. So it sounds like this is an even better version of that.
Yeah, no, it is. And Julia Cameron, she was married to Martin Scorsese. People don't realize that.
What?
She was married to Martin Scorsese, so she was, they were partners early on in the 70s as creative artists.
Oh my God, I had no idea. Jeez.
I guess the divorce wasn't that great, so don't talk about it much either.
Oh man, that's wild.
All right. Well, Doug, you want to talk about how your book can help us and help the situation today? So I was going to ask you what your analysis is of feminine heroes today in modern storytelling. What's happened, and how can the Heroine's Labyrinth help us articulate them?
Well, I would say that if you only have the hero's journey as a monomythic model, and it's not the right fit, then you are forced to kind of stretch things into it or force things into it. That's what I was doing when I was writing. And like, if you ever end up reading the book, you'll see, like, I have a mentor figure. Like, I was really serious about following the hero's journey in the beginning, and I left it because it still worked. It was beautiful, but other things went off into different directions. The Heroine's Labyrinth will give you an alternative model to consider whether or not your story conforms mostly to this set of archetypal designs or not. Not every story is a Heroine's Labyrinth, just like not every story is a hero's journey. And there are going to be some stories that defy both of them and take on their own thing. There's a lot of stories that I've studied where I was like, that's a little bit of the labyrinth. Oh, that's a little bit of the journey. I don't know what this is. And then there's others that look like they start as a journey and end as a labyrinth. Barbie actually starts. There's some very archetypal, clear-cut examples of hero's journey elements. And then at around the halfway point, when she gets back to Barbie land, we're not on a hero's journey anymore. We're in a heroine's labyrinth. And those archetypal designs begin coming up to the forefront more and more.
Well, do you know why? I want to refer to that because Margot Robbie said in an interview recently, because they're winning all these awards now, Golden Globes and everything. They're probably, I don't know if they'll win an Oscar. I think they deserve one, but I don't know if they will. They're winning, but they got a Golden Globe, which they deserved. And she gave an interview, she gave it on stage when she won the Golden Globe. When they won the Golden Globe, she gave this point. She said that when we went to the studio and said to them, we're going to make Barbie as a 4-quadrant movie for men and women, they laughed in our face. They laughed in our face, and nobody but women and young girls is going to watch Barbie. And they said, no, we're going to make this movie for men. And they did. It's because they switched these narratives. There is a structural narrative for the feminine, and there's a structural narrative for the narrative for the masculine, and they mesh. It's a very rare film, and they did it. And I don't know that they did it realizing they were doing it, but their intention was to make it for men, and they succeeded, which was seemingly impossible.
Yes, I thought they did a great job, and I also thought that the craftsmanship of the film itself, you could tell a great story and do a shoddy job with the actual film work, just like you can have a beautiful film with garbage story, like The Last Jedi, for example. So this was one where I thought that the film craft did something kind of unique. And I'll never forget, Greta Gerwig mentioned authentic artificiality in an interview. And I was like, oh, what a weird phrase. And she was talking about how you, like in Wizard of Oz, you could tell that the background's painted and artificial and that they're props, and yet it's beautifully done. It's intentionally done, and it still feels authentic to the story and to the visual storytelling medium. And I was like, I love that. So anyway, it was nice to hear a director talking purely about film craft.
And look, your own video. Your video wisely starts with The Wizard of Oz as the first example of the labyrinth, right? Of the yellow brick road, right? It's the first example. It's archetypal example, right? And And that is the number one movie that Greta Gerwig, she listed the 20 movies that inspired Barbie. The number one movie was The Wizard of Oz. And you can see that from the opening shot when you enter Barbie Land, and the backdrop is the pastel Wizard of Oz kind of world.
And it's got the pink brick road. She did a perfect job, and she left it all in the background. It was up to you to spot those things and make the connection. She didn't, no one said it, like, oh, that's just like, whatever. So anyway, I really did appreciate the film work there. So my point is, in terms of like telling a story, the Heroine's Labyrinth gives you something to work off of. I used to read memoirs. So I'm an ardent defender of the hero's journey. A lot of people, sometimes it's fashionable to trash it and be like, oh, it's male centric, it's xenophobic. There's a lot of criticisms about the hero's journey. And I'm like, well, there's a difference between wartime xenophobia, let's say, and like social xenophobia in polite society. So, it makes sense on some level in the hero's journey that you'd have some aspects of something like that. So my point is, I still felt like defending the hero's journey. And one of the big arguments I read, memoirists would say, I tried to use the hero's journey, but when I tried to fit my life into it, it just wouldn't work. And
do you know why? I can tell you right now why. What is memoir? What is memoir? It is memory. What is memory? It is remembering. What is remembering? Remembering is putting back things together. It is going through the labyrinth of our psychology of our mind. Memory is imagination, because memory is not accurate history. It is imaginal. It is psychological. We recreate the past through memory. We remember it. We put it back together. It is a labyrinthine journey. That's what memory is. That's what memoir is.
Wow. So you're saying that just to write a memoir, you're being psychological. It's a psychological process, and with imagination mixed in. So you're
and exactly. And within the labyrinth, especially when you're writing a memoir, when you're not writing a biography, when you're writing a memoir of yourself, it is always illusory, because you are tempted and inevitably do hide the darkest parts of your soul that you don't want to reveal in a memoir, unless you want to paint yourself as a victim or a hero that overcame something. But that part of you that's just inherently bad, that it hasn't been fixed, you don't want to remember that and present it. And those are the shadow parts of the labyrinth. They are the walls of the labyrinth that you get around because you don't want to look into the darkness. That's what memoir is.
I might actually incorporate that angle into it, because I never thought of that, but that's true. And like one thing that you said, and I think I mentioned this earlier, is you mentioned that the labyrinth does reflect symbolically the mind. So that's why that clip in Inside Out was in that video, because when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, I was like, you can't get a better image for the human brain.
I got it when I saw the Inside, because I loved Inside Out. I was a blubbering mess at the end of that movie. I mean, I was crying like a 5-year-old, right? And the funny thing is, the lights came on, and I looked around, and all the adults were blubbering messes at the end of Inside Out, right? And all the children, the 5 was like, "Mommy, why are you crying?" Right? Because it's memory. It's going back and facing the shadows that we've locked away. The imaginary friend, our Bing Bong that we all had, we have not thought about in 50 years because it's too painful to open the wound of letting Bing Bong go. Right? That moment when Bing Bong vanishes because she no longer needs an imaginary friend. I mean, I collapsed in my chair. I collapsed. It ripped me in the heart, because it is psychological journey. The whole movie is psychological journey, and you showed it in that clip.
Man, that is brilliant. I think you're totally right. You're right. The process of writing a memoir has these aspects to it. My, I guess, less dramatic answer was that most of us never leave the native culture. Most of us tend to have lives somewhat in a certain rhythm, and that the Heroine's Labyrinth might actually work better under those conditions. I remember reading one woman's blog, and it broke my heart a little bit. She's like, maybe women don't have the journey. Maybe we don't have a boon that we bring home. And I couldn't help but think that there's no way that that's true. But under the rubric of the hero's journey, she was left with that feeling that was her conclusion. I was like, that's a shame that anyone would want to come to that conclusion. Hopefully she doesn't believe it. But like in that case, the Heroine's Labyrinth could offer an alternative.
That's it. You've given her a new paradigm. You've given her a new paradigm to understand that she's been on a journey. She's been on a scarier journey. She's been into Mordor. She's been into the witch's castle, the Wicked of the West. I mean, she's gone on a journey as a woman that's scarier than a man's journey in some ways, right? Because
in some ways, yes. Yeah. Well, because they're not trying to kill you necessarily. So you have to deal with these people even after you've lost a social contest or been stigmatized. You wake up, you're still there. There's certain things about a challenge or a failed battle with the native culture that leave psychological scars that are really hard to get over. And sometimes they're hard to articulate, and sometimes no one wants to hear it. Right? How many of us have been in a tough time in our life and we realize that when we start talking about it, people are like, ooh, they got to, they're not necessarily
about your inner struggle. Because, first of all, we don't have your inner struggle, but it's also too raw for us. We're dealing with our own inner journey that's too difficult. And what is the feeling, the essential feeling of the Labyrinth? And you and I talked about this probably in our earliest conversation about the book, right? Which is that it is the feeling of being trapped. And if there's any phrase that I hear so much from women, more than men, frankly, is I feel trapped. I feel trapped by circumstances I can't control. More men, at least many men, I think, believe that they may be confined, but their destiny is to break the confinement. Whereas for women, it's like, my destiny is to find a way through this, but maybe I never will. Maybe there's always another turn that ends at a dead end. That's the fear of being forever trapped.
Yeah, well, and a lot of things in the culture are, we're going to deal with social rules. We've all had to put our foot in our mouth or do something. You're like, that didn't go over very well. You might have ruined an opportunity or something, and you have to deal with that. So just navigating social rules. It still lasts today in some cases. It's not so fun to not know the social rules and have to engage anyway. Or to face a hostile audience or have an unpopular idea. These terrify people. They say that public speaking is up there with death. I've seen this 1,000 times. I'm like, public speaking? Well, try it. I remember the first time I got up there, I was like, the wind comes out of you, and you're like, and then you lose focus, you lose sight of what you want to say, and the people are staring at you. These are different terrors. That are very different from something like Frodo might experience out on the trail, or a Luke Skywalker.
Because why is that? Because when you're standing there in front of an audience, all eyes are on you. So the energy is turned, forcing you to turn internally into what are you going to say? How are you going to behave? You're into your mind, and you don't think you can come through the labyrinth to come up with the right words or the right way to behave in front of this audience, right? So that is the nature of it.
Yes.
All eyes are on you. You're no longer thinking externally. I mean, the way to overcome it is to then, like people say, imagine everyone in their underwear. What's the purpose of that? It's to turn the energy back. Instead of everyone's eyes on you, your eyes are on everyone else. So as a result, you're no longer confined within the labyrinth, and you can freely give a gift, right? Again, that goes to the masculine. So it's about, I'm going to give something that's going to be very controversial right now. It just came to me, right? So it's controversial because it relates to religion. It relates to Gnosticism. It relates to a forbidden gospel. All right. And it relates to it. It just came to me right now. So are you familiar with the Gospel of Thomas?
No.
I've heard of it. No, I'm not.
Okay, the Gospel of Thomas is really amazing gospel that almost made it into the New Testament canon there, because it was hugely popular through the first 4 centuries of Christianity, and eventually Nicaea and other councils decided, for some of the reasons which I'll mention, Nicaea decided it's just too out there because it's a very mystical document. It's just a sayings document. There's nothing about Jesus goes and does miracles. It's 114 sayings of Jesus, many of which are in the canonical New Testament. And then there's like a lot. They're like, oh, this is new, right? But they're all sayings. It's a sayings gospel, and a lot of them are in John. It's very mystical stuff, right? But it ends with a controversial line, and it's the final line in 114, which is verse 114, which is Peter says, Peter, I think in a lot of the Gospels, certainly a lot of the non-canonical Gospels, Peter comes across as a little bit of a, frankly, a bit of a misogynistic jerk in these Gospels, right? He's like, he doesn't like Mary Magdalene. He's like pissed off that Jesus is very close with Mary, and it's a consistent theme in the Gnostic Gospels. Peter's like the guy who's like a bit, and in the official Gospels, he gets into trouble here and every now and then. He's a little bit of a hothead, a little bit of an impulsive guy. So the last thing Peter says to Jesus, he's like, you're blessing all these women like Mary Magdalene, right? It's but they are unworthy of life. Women are, because the character as portrayed in that gospel is misogynist. Women are unworthy of the afterlife. They're unworthy of life. And Jesus' response is that don't worry. He's referring to Mary Magdalene and his female followers. I will make her from female to male. And that's the last line of the gospel. It's a very interesting final saying.
That's
right?
The last line?
I will make her from female to male, right? And so people are like, what does he mean by that? Is Jesus being misogynist, right? And again, it's coming down to, but he's not. Again, whether one accepts that is an accurate stating of Jesus or not is irrelevant. Why was that a popular gospel for 4 centuries, right? It was obviously tapping into something. And this idea was tapping into conversations about the masculine and the feminine, right? And so what I would suggest is an interpretation of that saying is that whole thing where salvation is coming out from hell. It's coming out from the labyrinth. In the Christian tradition, Christ descends into hell after the crucifixion and then rises back through the resurrection, right? Okay, that's the Christian faith. And so you have to go into the labyrinth to come out on top, right? And come out into the light. And so what he's doing there is exactly what you're describing, is taking someone who's trapped inside the labyrinth of their own fear, of their own lack of faith, and feeling all the pressure of the world, all the eyes on you, trapping you inside the labyrinth of your soul. And then Jesus is like saying, no, I'm going to flip the energy. I'm going to take Mary Magdalene and I'm going to flip her polarity so that she's no longer trapped inside this hell. She comes out like she's now exploding outwards with his grace, right? That's a way to interpret that. That's not misogynistic, but it's about masculine and feminine energies, which your book is about, right? So do you see how that works? It came from what you're talking about is that now that Jesus is saying, I'm going in that Gnostic gospel, I'm going to turn the energy of the labyrinth into the energy of the sun.
Well, I think that's great because the hero's journey is markedly outward. It's an outward journey, so the energy is out. That the masculine symbol is an arrow pointing out, whereas the hero's journey heroine's labyrinth is very inward. So from that perspective, that lines up the idea of switching from male to female. If you're thinking of it like an electric current from a current going this way to one going out that way, that makes sense. And
that's how we think of polarity, right? We think of electricity as masculine and feminine, right? We think of, but that's not a negative or positive, right? It's just polarity.
Right. I totally agree. Yeah. And we were saying,
some people in the chat are not all that happy with my analogies. Again, I knew it was going to be controversial. Take whatever value in what I said and don't be offended. It's just, it's not in the New Testament. Obviously the Christian church decided it wasn't canonical, but take whatever is of value what I said. If something's not of value to you, then leave it.
Well, you could find value in things that are off the beaten path, so, and like you said, so I write about the Byzantine Empire in the 6th century. And actually, Cameron, when you, Heath, and Brianna, I believe, had the discussion on the Christmas story, you had launched into a comprehensive kind of analysis of the different types of Christianity that were around. And I think what you were doing was kind of setting the stage for how Islam fit into the discussion in the late 6th century, early 7th century, their answer to all these questions that were causing a lot of division in the Byzantine Empire. So, even when I'm writing the story, it's like these people all took this seriously. It's easy to say, oh, what? This is an extinct religion. Well, it wasn't. It was around for 400 years. That's a long time for these things to be around. You might not have heard of it, but it was there, and had a lot of followers, and they had their stories, and they had, I think this is even more important, their interpretation of the stories, which determined one religion or the other, how you interpret, like the nature of Christ, for example. Your answer to that question meant you were in this camp or that camp, So.
But where has our conversation gone? It's gone on the journey of your book. We've been going through a labyrinth here, and we're turning some interesting turns. We're finding some interesting surprise things we didn't see. Right, that's the name, because conversation is a psychological journey.
Yeah, well, and the idea of a journey, you go a long distance. You're traveling far. You're just not moving far from the center. And I think that there's something to say about that. There could be, combing over the same material or idea or subject matter, repetitive circles, that's part of it too. And that's not exactly an archetypal aspect of the hero's journey. And again, I love the hero's journey. And what's funny is I feel like we got to a point with the hero's journey where we universalized it. And this isn't bad fundamentally. However, when you go back to Campbell's original understanding of the hero's journey, he's very clearly talking about a warrior setting out far from his native culture. When you read what he's talking about with a threshold guardian, to get past the threshold guardian is to enter vast wilderness space of sea, desert, tundra. So these vast, wide open wildernesses that you're not accustomed to. So that's very different. We may universalize that and say, well, heroines stay, in British society in the 18th century, which is similar to going. What I'm saying is you're free of having to fit that in there. You can go out on the journey. You can be a warrior. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with being a warrior. Every culture has warriors, and a warrior
cultures only survive because of warriors. Let's be frank here. I mean, it's like saying you don't need a wall in the village. It's something. Boundaries are good. Defense is good. Police are good. I mean, these are things of a civilization. Warriors are good, right?
Fundamentals.
They can be. Right? It's all about their purpose. Yes.
Right. So yeah, exactly. What I'm saying is that the warrior role is something that society has to fulfill one way or the other, whether it is men or women. No one really cares if someone is whoever's going to fulfill that warrior role has to do that job. And let me tell you, the more I understand about the hero's journey, the more I see it as an expansion of the epic soldier's journey, really. A warrior who exceeds the elements of just the common warrior. However, all the tropes are the same. Even today, if I were to join them, if I was of age and join the military, I would have to leave home. I would have to assume a new identity. They shave my head. I would have to learn a skill set. I would have people teaching me this skill set. And then perhaps one day I'm deployed far from home where my destruction is possible. That's very similar to the hero's journey. So that's why I believe it is a warrior trope. In my book, I try hard not to say it is a masculine journey. However, I believe that it is tied to masculine energy because most of the people who fulfilled the warrior role in history have been men. That does not make it exclusive, though. That's kind of my understanding.
But let's go back to the labyrinth. The labyrinth itself, the archetype is Theseus and the Minotaur, right? It's a male warrior going there, and the only way he can do it is was a woman shows him a way through it.
Ariadne.
Ariadne. There's no other way. She gives him the thread. He can't figure it out. His masculine thing is going to get him killed in there. He has no way out.
Totally true.
He wouldn't have gotten this. A woman will figure it out.
Yeah. In fact, I was proud to discover that. In the book, I mentioned that. I was like, although Theseus slays the Minotaur, it was Ariadne who solved the maze. And in the movie Inception, the maze maker, her name is Ariadne. So these things do tend to show, and obviously that was chosen for a reason. I think Christopher Nolan, did he write the screenplay to Inception? I think he did, right?
Yeah, I think I think if the screenplay doesn't quite make sense, he wrote it.
It makes kind of sense, but not total sense.
It's a brilliant film, whatever. But if it doesn't quite work, he wrote it, and that's okay.
I will say I have kind of a soft spot for Inception. It was harder to what it doesn't age as well as I thought. I watched it
directed, yes,
semi recently, and I remember being like, "Huh." I remember being more like mesmerized by this, and I'm not quite there anymore. But I still am kind of partial to it. But that is an interior journey, very similar to a heroine's labyrinth, in which it appears to be, a fantastic outward journey. I can't tell you how many stories have the appearance of a fantastic outward journey, but really, she's right. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once is an example of that. Alice in Wonderland is an example of that, Wizard of Oz is an example of that. Even Chronicles of Narnia, she finds, another secret door in the wardrobe, and Narnia is beyond that, but it's inside the house. So, you can explore well-trodden areas, and there's all sorts of dramatic events and archetypal scenarios that people care about close to you, nearby. So, but anyway, but that's the basic notion for the Labyrinth, I would say. Let me see if there's anything else that, and we don't have to cover every single archetype, but I think the most important one is the Labyrinth, because from this fundamental difference, and I had a couple debates on the idea that the Heroine's Labyrinth was a reskin of the hero's journey, just in different words. And
some of which took place here on this channel.
And some of which took place here, some of which took place on DBJ's channel as well. There was a couple questions about it. And of course, I'm open to any sort of consideration of these things. But I thought about it long and hard, and I was like, I think absolutely there's a fundamental difference between the inward journey and the outward journey. And I think it's such a fundamental difference that from that one divergence, you begin to see differences across that spectrum. Like the villain. If you go out, the hero's journey almost always features a militant subjugator or culture destroyer. A militant, like Thanos, military. Vader and the Emperor, these are military guys. Grendel, Smaug, these are culture destroyers. They annihilate you, and they're dangerous. That is not who the heroines are facing in a lot of these stories. And I'll bring up a cool example. Ripley, I love Ripley. She pulls double duty. She goes on the hero's journey in that she leaves her native culture and she faces the distant dragon. In the first film, it's an alien. And in the second film, it's the queen alien. However, she's also surrounded by her native culture. And she also has to unmask a Minotaur, a homegrown villain of her native culture in both films. In the first one, it's Ash. And in the second one, it's Burke, obviously. So she pulls double duty.
And she has to navigate labyrinths in both. First the spaceship, and then the base, as we saw in some of your clips, right? When she's got news. Yes. Totally.
And I think that's why men and women, like you said, Barbie had kind of elements of both, and both sides kind of responded like, hey, I like this movie. Maybe I don't know why, but I like it. Aliens has that too. My mom, my wife, they love Alien and Aliens. So there is something there for both. That and even in Alien, I realized that idea of making it to the center of the maze to find out secrets. When Ripley in the first film, Alien, goes to meet with Mother to discover the secret agenda of their mission, that's it. And then who's there? Right when she discovers it, Ash is sitting right next to her, and they have to have a confrontation. But Ripley has to confront two villains, both archetypal villains, and she beats both in both films.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pretty amazing.
So, gentlemen, forgive me. I actually have to head out in about 10 minutes. I got a text from a producer that I need to deal with something. So what can I add? Because I think the conversation will continue whether I stay or not. What can I add to this conversation before I leave, if anything?
What is, Doug, if you have something, then that's great. But I was going to say, what is your major problem, Kamran, with the way that women heroes are depicted today, and how can that be improved?
Great. Well, I think it comes down to the fact that they're not being that the journey that we're talking about, the feminine journey, is inherently being rejected because, and I'm going to make some more controversial comments, so forgive me, right? But these are the comments, right? These are my opinions, and interpret them as you will. Take what's of value to them. So I think we're at a stage of not even third wave feminism, we're at a place of fourth wave feminism, which has in some ways gone full circle, in my opinion, to the point that we are at a point where a woman is no longer defined in any way, right? That's what I think fourth wave feminism is. One could argue in a critique of the feminist stages. One could argue that phase one is all about getting basic rights like voting, right, and property rights. Okay, stage two is about the legal rights, and then stage two is becoming a person, like stage one, becoming a legal person. Number two, okay, I want to be equal to men. I want to be be able to be the CEO too, right? That's arguably phase 2. Stage 3, arguably, I think is, at least the critics of it would suggest that it's more about reversing, or it's about reversing the injustices of those previous stages. And then as a result, perhaps exalting women over men as a means of correcting the injustices of centuries and millennia, right? That, and a critic would say it's all about giving female dominance, right? And then stage 4, which I think is really about 10 or 15 years old, maybe, or at least entered academia in a very serious way at that point. Phase 4 feminism, I think, is really about what is a woman, right? Is we've had that argument that the very attributes that we use to define the feminine are inherently oppressive. So now we're at this intersectional place, which lops into the current trans conversation, right? Which really wasn't happening in the earlier stages. And so now, because you had transvestites, that was the term that was used before. Now the term is transgender because the meaning has changed because gender is changing in its meaning, right? Or at least the way it's being used, the words is being used. So with that said, because we've entered this fourth wave where the very attributes of the feminine are seen as constructs, or the traditional feminine, right? Are seen as social constructs and not inherent to the human condition. As a result, there's been a stripping away of the feminine journey, so in all these earlier stages that we had, there were female heroes. I mean, you go back to silent films, in the 1920s, before women could, 1910s, before women could even vote, right? Nationwide in the United States, right? There were silent film stars, right? I'm writing a script right now about Alla Nazimova, a Broadway star who became a huge silent film star in the late 1910s. And she's now forgotten, but she was a revolutionary artist, right? And she became the richest woman in Hollywood before she could have the right to vote. I mean, it's quite remarkable, right? And so you have that stage, and then in the different stages, you had, even in the 60s, second wave feminism, you had the Emma Peels, right? The Avengers, right? You had these and then you had the Bionic Womans and the Wonder Womans of the 70s, right? And leading into Ripley, as you talked about, and all the great female heroes, the 80s. And so, all the way up to, the Terminator, and Linda and all of that. And so then and that was celebrating. And what was interesting is you can see an evolutionary change. I think I'll use the example of the evolutionary change of what we saw with the character in Terminator, where she starts off in a traditionally feminine role. She's a waitress, and a lot of that movie is her running and being protected by this futuristic soldier from this mindless machine that's trying to kill her, right? And in the end, by the end she crushes it, right? She smashes it when she's going through the labyrinth of the factory, yes. right? And she smashes it and whatever, and she realizes that her destiny is to be the mother of this future savior of humanity. And how do we see her in the next movie? Linda Hamilton. First thing you see her is, in her asylum with she's got better muscles than most men do, right? And she's kicking ass. Yeah, she was tough. So we've already seen a change where now I think that's a turn. That's a turning point, Terminator 1 to Terminator 2, where we're switching from second stage feminism to third wave feminism. Now she's more physically stronger than men, and she makes a spiel in that movie about how men suck, right? She makes a spiel. Yeah. Her son, rolls his eyes. Mom, it's not about sex. It's not. Can we be constructive here? She's like, men like you. Yeah, the men like you that you don't know how to create life and you create only death. That's now we're entering third wave, right? But even then, she's still feminine. She's a mother. She's maternal. She's embracing that role, right? And so those characters are interesting because I think men were still fine with those characters, right? Because and they kind of laughed off like, we all men kind of suck, but it's okay. Because she hasn't she's still a woman, or a traditional feminine, a woman in the sense of a protective mother, right? Because those definitions are still there. Now, in the last 10 years, with the rise of intersectionalism and this new wave of feminism, where the very idea of a woman is challenged, that you can have male genitalia and say that you are a woman, and have access to female spaces because there's no difference, right? That's the argument where we are, or at least where we were until maybe about a year ago. And so with that, Hollywood's portrayal of women moved away from giving women any attributes. The example we'll use of an actress I love who was in a horrible situation is Daisy Ridley in the Star Wars, wonderful actress. She lights up the screen. You know, I've seen her in other films. She's quite good. She was just given a garbage script in these terrible movies, right? And yes, I see some discussion of that. These are terrible movies, in my opinion. These are terrible movies. And The Last Jedi is the worst movie of all time. It's the worst movie ever made. It's literally the worst movie ever made. I mean, you know, Plan 9 from Outer Space is a better movie because there's heart and love in it, right? I mean, you know, and so
That counts.
I mean, there is. Yeah, Ed Wood loved. He just wasn't a good filmmaker, but he loved what he was doing. Whereas, Mr. Johnson and the people involved in The Last Jedi loved destroying what they were doing, and they knew what they were doing, right? They were intentionally destroying it. And so, but her character, from even in J.J. Abrams' early effort with The Force Awakens, there's nothing there, right? You know, she's in no way feminine. Her body type and suit, no curves are allowed to be seen. She never changes her costume in all these movies. She's still wearing the same. Over all these years, she's got only one pair of clothes. This like shapeless, tunic, right? Whereas go back to Leia, who we meet Leia. First thing we meet Leia is Darth Vader. Only you would be so bold. This dude who we just saw crush some guy with his bare hand, crush his throat. And he's like 2 feet taller than her, and she's like, Darth Vader, screw you. That's and then she's firing laser guns and whatever. I mean, this chick is cool, but then she's hot. She's like wearing flowing dresses. I mean, she's beautiful. None of those movies. I mean, Ultimate in Return of the Jedi, she's wearing the gold bikini. They show her curves. That's embraced, right? Whereas poor Daisy Ridley, who's a lovely woman, is essentially neutered into having no gender identity at all of any kind. So as a result, she has no personality. She's not given that. The actress has personality. The character wasn't given it. And so no one could identify with it. I mean, I think that's a deeper issue beyond, people complaining, oh, Rey was superpowered and all that. That's the external issue. The internal issue was she had no identity. She was not, it wasn't even not non-binary. She was non-unitary. There's nothing there. It was a stick figure that you could male, female, pointless person, no personality with superpowers. No one could identify with that because we're still human beings in a body, whether, even in the modern world where we're talking about trans and all this, there's still a concept of the energy, when someone becomes a trans woman, they're changing from one energy to another energy, right? So, okay. So we are identified with some kind of energy, masculine or feminine within ourselves. This character is not being given anything. And as a result, there is no humanity. It's literally become like the Terminator. It's a robot. Right. And that's what they did to female characters, by taking away any polarization at all. It took away any empathy for them and any human connection. And it broke storytelling because we need each other, male and female, masculine and feminine. Right. We need these polarities. If you go down to a big zero, as someone was mentioning, I think it was Sable in the comments was talking about Taoism and the yin and the yang, the Tao. The ultimate Tao, the ultimate reality, you can call it God, you can call it the Tao, but the infinite reality is the first line of the Tao Te Ching is that the Tao that can be named is not the true Tao, right? Okay. So if you can define it, it's not ultimate reality. But since all we can deal with is what is definable, we'll never know the Tao. What we can know is the next stage, which is the yin yang symbol, which is when the Tao takes a polarized reality. Right. And the genius of the yin yang symbol inherent in it, this is 10,000 years old.
Ancient,
the genius of the symbol is that it's not white and black. It's white with a black dot and black with a white dot, because the feminine has the seed of the masculine and the masculine has the seed of the feminine. That's 10,000-year-old symbolism that we understood. Right. And so that is the first level of being, of consciousness, of awareness, of I and thou. To have any awareness at all, you must be aware of something, right? And to be aware of something outside yourself, there must be a boundary. And then that creates polarity, that creates masculine, feminine, it creates charges, and so that's the only way. And I say that as a Sufi mystic. I say, the Sufis say that union, when you achieve union with God, which is called fanafi Allah, which literally, it's like what Buddhists would call nirvana, or Christians would call, becoming one with Christ,
salvation.
Right? Or just what Christ says in the Gospels, especially the Gospel of John. I'm one with the Father, and you and to the disciples. I'm in the Father, and you are in me. Right? I'm paraphrasing, but that's the idea. So the idea is to become one within Christ. Right? Okay? And so the idea is then to lose your individual identity. Well, the Sufis explore that, and that is the goal, but that's not the final goal. Fana fi Allah is halfway there. So Fana, which is absorption into the Tao, to the infinite, is halfway there. Because you have to go in there to experience reality, which is beyond binary, which is beyond masculine, feminine. It is beyond subject and object. It's beyond those things. It is pure unity. But then you have to return to the world of duality, which is called Baka, which is the next stage. This is the next stage of the spiritual journey. Union with God is not the final stage. The next stage is to take the lesson of that into the world of duality and live it. Right.
Is the thinking behind that kind of like if your only relationship is with God, you're kind of cut off from the practical expression of it, kind of?
Yeah. Well, and the Sufis say if you experience fana, if you experience annihilation within the divine, you won't remember it. So you will never know. Because going back to what we said about memory and the labyrinth, right? It's going back, everything comes full circle, going back memory. Memory is an effort to recreate, right, through imagination and experience. But if you experience beyond experience, there's nothing to recreate. So you'll come out of it never having known you were there because you won't remember it.
It's impossible to remember.
Because memory is a recreation. Memory is an effort it's a remembering. It's putting back together pieces. But once you've experienced the infinite, there's no pieces. So there's nothing to put back together.
And one thing you actually just mentioned it that I always kept in mind was you said I and thou. And that, to me, like just that title denotes the relationship. It's great if I attain this great thing, but if I have no relationship with other people, if there's nothing happening in that in-between space where the relationship occurred, then it's all almost for naught. You've just it's like a space monkey. You're just out there and you're floating in space to some extent. And
and you have the Hindu sages will tell these stories, and I should probably wind down in a minute. The Hindu sages will tell these stories of the wise, the wise fakir, the wise sage who escapes the world and goes to the mountain for 30 years and meditates and achieves, unity with the Atman, nirvana, whatever term you want to use, and he achieves oneness, and then he comes back down to the village after 30 years of being alone in the mountain and achieving oneness. And the moment he's down there, within 5 seconds, he's annoyed with the obnoxious people in the street. Some guy almost runs over the cart. He starts shouting at the guy. So he's brought nothing back with him. He's just gone right back, right? So there's no change in his character. So he never experienced it. He didn't, the change of people saying, well, you've never experienced duality. If you come back to duality, you haven't experienced it. I don't want to get into that mystical debate. The point of the return is that you come back changed so that your behavior, you start treating others as one with you naturally because you've experienced it. You may not remember it, but suddenly instead of that person who comes up to you and slaps you in the face, instead of seeing them as your adversary, your automatic reaction having experienced oneness is to see them as you. So how can you be angry at them? If you're being slapped in the face, you're doing it to yourself. So why are you doing it? What's the experience about, right? Why are you slapping yourself in the face? Why are you doing this to yourself? That's not something that you naturally go to. Once you experience unity, you come back charged that way. So you treat the world differently, right? Which is the journey. It's that's and the final thing I say, it goes right back to the controversial comment about the Gospel of Thomas. It's coming out of the labyrinth into the light.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's amazing commentary, first off. And you got me thinking again about the idea of the relationship. What good is change if you can't apply it anywhere? It's like knowing and not doing is equal to not knowing, that phrase I've heard before. So if you do attain something, knowledge, it's not just you've learned something. You should be able to
you're changed. You're changed.
Yes.
And this is the last thing I'll say because then I have to go. And that brings us back to your wonderful book, because what you've done is you've shown us the change happens in both the masculine and feminine journeys. The masculine journey of the hero's journey, the change, it's internal, but it's mostly external. You come back bringing back wisdom to others, right? Bringing back the jewel, the boot, right? But here, the feminine journey, as you navigate the Labyrinth, right? What is changing is you. The labyrinth is not necessarily changing. The
Correct.
external environments of relationships aren't necessarily changing. You are changing, and then you relate to the labyrinth in a different way, right?
Yes.
And see, that's what on that, my friends. Everyone stick around. You guys are gonna still talk, right? I'm not taking off. You guys.
Check out Cameron's Patreon.
Great. We come out. We have this kind of conversation every now and then. Mostly we just grumble about Hollywood, but we do have these kinds of philosophical conversations, and I encourage you to join. It's worth. I promise you, it's worth the $5. It's worth it. And you have this kind of sophisticated people talking and sharing ideas that are not normal in the external world. So, all right, my friend.
There's a lot of, Cameron hosts a lot of discussions about pop culture, but there's a lot of off-roads into some very deep thoughts and discussions. So it's not surfacey all the time. It's not surfacey. There's a lot there. So I fully recommend it.
I do too. I'm part of it.
God bless everyone. And I say that even to Robert McKee, who made it clear there is no God, but nonetheless, Stephen Pressfield wrote a pretty good book. So thank you, Robert McKee, for sharing that opinion in the blurb. Thank you, Christopher Vogler, for not inserting his religious beliefs into your blurb, which is a huge accomplishment.
I'll have to thank him on a separate note on that.
All right, God bless everyone. I will see you all
later.
later.
Make great contacts. Go make movies and TV, Cameron. Go for it. Later, thank you.
Yeah, that's Cameron's. I like Cameron because he can go also to a level of depth that is not common in an otherwise in any conversation, really. And that's saying something, because you have to have that depth in order to discuss something at that depth. So and Cameron's got that.
Yes, he did. And I knew we only had him for a little bit of time, but I really wanted to be sure. I mean, it was fantastic to have him to talk about your books. I wanted to have him here for that material. And this is just amazing, because he did. Yeah, he said he's on the blurb. He's given a blurb for it. He was an early reader of this. I haven't even read the whole text yet. But he's read the whole text. We've had both barrels verbally here, which, by the way, let me bring that up too, that we have not been going over every single archetype tonight. I got some more questions to talk about and things like that that were going on. But, Doug's very first appearance on Table Talk was this one right here, Heroine's Labyrinth, Feminine Alternative to the Hero's Journey with Douglas A. Burton. That was number 021. And it's here on this channel now. It's been brought back over here and released. This is now its permanent home. If you want a step-by-step walkthrough of everything about the Heroine's Labyrinth with every different archetype and different step that it has, just very similar to the way that Vogler does the hero's journey in his book, The Writer's Journey, that's here. That is on this channel. So that right there, that's the one that you need to go to next. If you're looking for a step-by-step through the heroine's.
Yes. And we cover a lot of examples. And I actually was listening to parts of that one that you reposted, because I was curious to see how much my description of, or how I explain it, has changed since that first attempt. And, it's evolved a lot. And a lot of that's due to the chat, and to you, Heath, and to Brianna, and to James Bacon and Sable Phoenix, questioning it, thinking about it. Also at times where I'm like, no, that's not quite right. That's not what I meant to say. And then finding a better way to present or say it or articulate something. So there was an evolution of this idea right here on this channel. And about a week ago, I sent, my quote unquote final, and I put it in quotes because there's never any final changes. My final revisions for the manuscript. And she got it. She's like, this is a lot, Doug. I'm like, I either do it now or I hold my peace forever. So this was my speak now or forever hold your peace revisions. So I went through, and based on these discussions, I updated a lot of the language, changed some of my phrases, changed some of the examples, and the anatomy of an archetype sometimes I found was missing a key element that I was like, ugh. So I had to add that. So this channel has been pivotal in helping shape the Heroine's Labyrinth, at least the language of it, which is important because that's how you can make something understandable and useful if you're a writer.
Let's go over here. We can talk about characters for a little bit tonight, but also let me go over here. I've started a few things from James and Sable. So we're going to be talking about, by the way, so the book right here, your book that's out right now is Faraway Bird, which is the one that inspired this. And we're going to be talking about this on Tuesday. This is about the Empress Theodora,
Yep.
And I've started it. I am into it. I'm going to be going through. I'm on chapter 9 right now, so I'm getting through this before Tuesday. So on Tuesday on this channel, we're going to be discussing Faraway Bird, which is on Amazon. You get the hard copy here, but also the audiobook, which you had custom music for. So I'm going through the audiobook. I'm reading it as I'm going through the audiobook. So the audiobook is going with the music as I'm going through it.
Chapter 9's a doozy, buddy.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that on Tuesday. So Empress Theodora, Faraway Bird, Doug's book on Tuesday in this series about feminine heroes and this Heroine's Labyrinth. But James says in that context, Doug, when I began Faraway Bird, I actually took out the materials you provided when we had our discussion on the Heroine's Labyrinth. James has been on the channel and has discussed the Heroine's Labyrinth with Doug, challenged him, and Doug kind of had a thesis defense with James. So took out the discussion of the Heroine's Labyrinth so I could track the labyrinth against Theodora's story. Now, being about 75% of the way through it, I must say that this is the strongest example of the labyrinth you proposed. And of course it would be, but I want to stress how strong of the example it is. The entire structure comes into focus through Faraway Bird, and I think you should begin there when addressing the topics in the labyrinth.
Awesome. James, that's huge, and I'm glad you're looking for it because it's subtle. It's baked into the language. You know, you're not, you know, there's no like footnote that says, by the way, this is the sacred fire. You would have to find it. So if you're finding it, that you understand, you're proficient in the archetypal designs, and you're able to do all reading and narrative. It's actually easier to spot in a visual medium like a movie. That's why it was so fun to put that like video together, because I could find visual, perfect evidence of all the archetypes. But when you're reading a book, you know, you're going through it paragraph by paragraph. I'll have to set it down and ask myself, now hold on a second, did anything just occur archetypally speaking? So I would just read the chapter, you know, straight through for reading purposes, and then I'd have to stop and think about it and really think about it, because in order to analyze a book in terms of its archetypal power, you have to understand the book, understand the concepts, understand the story and what's happening, and then be able to understand it at the level to analyze it and go back over it. So that is not an easy task, what you just described.
So when we've got a lot to talk about on Tuesday with that, we certainly want to talk about the Heroine's Labyrinth story beats as it relates to Faraway Bird. You know, that story. I want to talk to you also about the world building of the Roman Empire and things like that as well. So there's a lot that we can go into.
Well, I'll tell you, as a former I shouldn't say former, I just don't do it as much now. It's just at my stage of life, but I want to, and I can't wait till the kids are getting just a little bit older. I can get them into it. I think I'm going to get them playing Alien from Free League is going to be my first one. But I just lost my train of thought. What was I going to say?
As a former role player.
Oh, yeah. The world building.
Oh, the world building. Yeah.
So a lot of historical fiction writers have an academic background, and sometimes you can tell when you're reading the book that it sounds a little. It creeps in a little textbooky, right? Sometimes, and I think what saved me, and I'm not saying I nailed this every time, but what I tried very hard never to let that happen while writing Faraway Bird, and what helped me was writing fantasy, role-playing in fantasy. So to me, writing about the Byzantine Empire was almost like writing about a fantasy culture, because it's so unfamiliar that it was actually fun to describe and world build a place that's really an extinct culture. So it's Christian, but not like we're Christian. Like, it's different, you know? It's Roman, but it's also Christian.
It's also Greek.
Roman in the way where the Roman Empire is dead in the West. They speak Greek, not so much Latin. I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Well, I said it's also Greek. It's Roman, but it's also Greek.
Yeah. So it's this weird patchwork. Well, and it's only a patchwork because in its wake, different aspects of the Byzantine Empire kind of got outsourced to different cultures. Like Russia actually became a kind of still has some autocratic thinking like the Byzantine Empire, the Russian Orthodox Church, the Greek Orthodox Church. So it kind of the Habsburg Empire still has the double eagle of Byzantium as its symbol. So it survived in all these different forms. So when I look back, I see how it survived, backwards. So it looks like a weird fusion of these things. But in reality, this was the core concept, and it dispersed into these other cultures over the centuries. And now we only recognize pieces of it, as it dispersed.
James says, honest to God, I would consider selling them as a pair. You read the Labyrinth, and then you read Faraway Bird. It's essential.
That's great. So I would love that. Obviously, from a marketing standpoint, I would love that. But it's a niche book. It's hard to get people. You have to get people to choose to read your book about the 6th century Byzantine Empire versus that book over there about World War II. Or that one over there.
Also, the Heroine's Labyrinth is too. I mean, that's for writers and people who are doing stories. So,
correct.
Right.
But in historical fiction, you can lose that face-off pretty quick when the further back in time you go. So my goal is to try to do that, James, to be like, look, if you want to see how you can use the archetypal designs in a way in narrative prose, where I don't ever say it, but they're in there. Read Faraway Bird. You'll find them, and you'll also find a lot of archetypal designs of the hero's journey. James, you've read it. I'm sure you've seen it. There's the wise mentor who appears. She, believe it or not, I even modeled some Star Wars. I won't even say. I'll wait till Tuesday when you finish.
We can go into that on Tuesday.
There are hero's journey tropes because that's how I started modeling this, and there are also strong Heroine's Labyrinth tropes in there too. In fact, I name her Sacred Fire in the book. I give it a name to draw attention to, because in like a Disney movie, you get to do a musical number. There's Ariel singing about what she wants. I want this. There's Moana. She's singing. She's going to go out past the breakers. Hard to do in a book. So to try to draw, you can either do a visual. I gave it I actually called it the Speciosa V, which is a Latin phrase for the beautiful force. So that was my way to try to add some credence to it. And you'll see, if you're writing and you try to employ these, you'll see how you take the seed concept of the archetype, and then here's your idea. Here's what you're writing about. And you slip it in and you fuse it. It becomes its own thing. And the seed is like dissolves into your imaginative scenes. It's beautiful. That's what I love about archetypes. They can have such a wide range of expression.
Let me see what you think about Sable's comment here. Sable's comment says, the question of the hero is, are you willing to die for what you believe? The question of the heroine is, are you willing to live with the consequences of what you believe?
That's an interesting way to put that. Because, there are severe consequences for both. And the hero... So, okay. Here, keep that phrase up because
okay, we got that up. Yeah.
So I have tried to, and I think I've spoken on this a little bit before. I've tried to analyze in the end, what the hell is the hero getting out of all of this? He goes on this journey. He breaks that. He has a symbolic death. This is not a fun journey. When you actually look at the hero's journey and see what it's telling you will experience, it's not a fun journey. And you'll be destroyed in this journey spiritually on some level because you'll have to be reborn. You'll go into the belly of the beast, and nobody wants to be in there. And that's assuming you survive. And if you come out, you have a different identity. So this is a tough journey for the hero. What does he get out of all this? A medal? Is that why he did this? He wanted to wear a medal? Is that really the core apex principle that the hero is after? When I read a lot of books that criticize the hero's journey, I was always irritated by the analysis because they're like, oh yeah, that way you get to put a trophy on your wall. I'm like, you think that's why these people are facing death? To put a trophy on the wall? No, that's not at all what that's a complete and fundamental misunderstanding of the hero and the hero's journey, in my opinion. So my conclusion was worthiness. The trophy or the medal is simply an external manifestation that the culture has recognized you as worthy. And to become worthy is not so easy a thing. You have to do something that is dangerous, possibly at the risk of your own life. So what Sable said, am I willing to die for this? That's usually part of the bargain. And that's a tough position to put yourself in. And let me tell you, for every hero that survives, there's 20 that did not. So, which one are you going to, where are you going to fit into all this if you're actually going to go on this journey? So the hero becomes worthy. And why
Luke
is that?
was the only X-Wing that got out. Of course, now we have a Y-Wing in the special edition or whatever. But
There
were
was a Y-Wing, yeah.
There were a
Which
lot of
we found.
X-Wings that went in, and Luke Skywalker came out.
Yeah, so what was he doing? He did the bombing run. He just kind of hovered around out there, circled.
I do remember my friend and I being so surprised by that, because, like, canonically, I thought that Luke Skywalker was the X-Wing, and then all of a sudden in the special edition, the Y-Wing also flew by, and we both went, "What? Who was in that Y-Wing?"
Gold leader's back. Drood and Fuzz just hit it on the head. The hero, the warrior, warrior role is fundamentally expendable. Your whole generation might be flushed down the toilet in order to save the culture, and a lot of these guys don't come back, the warriors. So the warrior is grappling with his own expendability. That's absolutely correct. And it's difficult to grapple with that. I remember having a discussion with my dad, and he was in a Vietnam draft, and he drew a very low number, which at the time he was like, it's certain, it was like 32 or something, which was all but certain that he was going to go to Vietnam in the draft. And it really effing irritated him, because he started to really grapple with that. He's like, oh my God, I can't say no to this. And then when they drew the lottery number, it was like 4. So like everybody was off the hook, but 3 guys still went, even with that low number. Anyway, he didn't have to go during that draft. But he's told me on numerous occasions how much he was bothered by the idea that he's expendable, that the culture is going to grab him by the collar, throw him out there and be like, go save us. And then if they die, at least you tried, good job. Watching Saving Private Ryan, you see which is a very tough opening to a war film. You don't want to be out there. There's no valor. There's no great athleticism or great skill. You are hoping to not randomly be blown away in that amphibious assault. So this is a terrible thing for a hero, right? To attempt this. You are expendable. So when the hero survives all of this and does something noteworthy, slays the distant dragon, he's proven himself to be worthy, which is the opposite of expendable. It's the opposite. You're important to the culture. That's a big deal to the warrior. It's a big deal. And what's interesting is in heroine-centric stories, it's almost the opposite message. Heroines are treated as so precious that they are locked away and forbidden to risk themselves in anything that could cause any sort of consequence, which is usually the grounds for their captivity. Women and children first. You're too precious to risk. Stay away. Don't go out there. Don't get pregnant. Don't screw up your prospects. Don't do these things that'll disrupt your potential future in the role we've chosen for you. So your heroines are treated as so valuable as to be like stifled, suffocated in this preciousness. So it's very different. So I asked myself, for the heroine, what does she get out of all this? It's not worthiness. She's not worried about her expendability. She's not treated like that by the culture. Validation is what I came up with as the best answer to date. That she was right about something about the native culture. She had a moral compass. She had a belief in something. She saw through a lie or a deception. She gambled. She risked it all to break that up. And the heroine hopefully succeeds in doing that. And if she does, you get the broken spell, one of the archetypal designs. So the way Sable Phoenix worded that was pretty good, I think, because it does play into both of those answers. One, I am not expendable, says the hero, and I was right, says the heroine. She was right about something that mattered, and people denied her. They told her she wasn't right. The deception held up while she, made her way through the maze. Anyway, that got my wheels spinning.
No, that was fantastic. We could take a look at a couple of heroines if you have a little bit of more time that we haven't probably gotten to as much. I've got a couple that I can bring up to you, and you can discuss and tell us how these heroines fit into the Heroine's Labyrinth, or what archetypes from the Heroine's Labyrinth that they best exemplify.
Okay.
So how does Eowyn from The Lord of the Rings fit into the heroine's labyrinth, and what does she exemplify archetypically?
So Éowyn, I love Éowyn, by the way. Lady Éowyn in Lord of the Rings. She so Tolkien's often criticized for not having enough females in his story. Even for someone who's a big advocate for heroines, it doesn't necessarily bother me if there's too many men or too many women in a story. It depends whether the story's good. That's really what I care about most. And The Lord of the Rings was not necessarily a story based on a woman character or a group of women. So, this story's not about you in this case, right? Just like there are some stories, it's not about the dude. It's not about guys. It's not about you either. So it depends on who's the story's for. Lord of the Rings was about Frodo, Gandalf, the One Ring. That said, here's Lady Éowyn, and she has several, and she's in there only for an abbreviated period of time, but boy, does she have a couple of the big ones. So she's in a captivity bargain, very clearly in Rohan, and in the film portrayal of her, it comes out beautifully. She's like, she's dressed in white, which is usually a virginal or, pure color. This is the innocent maiden. That's the idea visually behind that archetype. And Princess Leia was dressed in white. So she, though, is a warrior, and she has warrior skills. And there's the scene in the movie where she's practicing her warrior moves. And as she spins around, Aragorn is there, and he blocks he parries the strike. And she's kind of like shocked to see him there. And he asks her a simple question. What do you fear, my lady? And she says, a cage. To be, I forget the exact phrase, but to be, held down until all chance of valor has gone beyond recall or desire. It's a great line. But she says it right there. I'm in a captivity bargain, and I don't want to be. She actually wants to be the warrior. She wants to go on the hero's journey. And the king consistently says no. And there's one time where I get a little emotional watching it because I think about it on this level or within this framework. At one point, she's like, I'm going to come with you and fight. And the king's like, no. And you could see she's wounded by this assertive, not going to happen answer to her. And he's like, go take, the women and the children again and take them into the caves. You're doing an important, and the king tries to say, this is an important task. And Éowyn's like, and you could see the wounded look on her face. And she does this. She follows the king's order, and she takes the women and children into the caves, which is their last, redoubt. However, in Return of the King, Éowyn is one of the best shield maidens ever. And I can't wait to make my shield maiden video like the Labyrinth video. So the shield maiden is spectacular. I think it's one of the most heroic, one of the most spectacular heroic moments in all of fiction, because it doesn't matter who you are. A lot of these heroines step up and rise to extraordinary levels in order to become the shield maiden. And she's a classic shield maiden. She literally has a shield. And who does she go up against? The Witch King of Angmar. It's beautiful too, because she also, let me back up 1 second. Before she becomes a shield maiden, Éowyn also entrusts the fragile power. Merry does not. Merry wants to go fight. And he's a hobbit. He's not very threatening. He doesn't look like he's going to fulfill the warrior role very well. And the king kind of tells him in blunt language, none of my men can bear you as a burden. So basically, take that as you will. I don't think you should be out here. You want to come? That's on you. That's kind of the king's attitude. And Merry's a little... So Éowyn bets on Merry. She even says that line, why can't he fight for those he loves? She sees herself in Merry. He's also being denied the chance for valor and a warrior role if he so chooses. And she grabs him and she hoists him onto her horse and she takes him onto the battlefield. And this is a horrible place to take him. But she bet on the fragile power. So now the king has succeeded in his charge. He's driven off a lot of the orcs. And here comes the Nazgul, the Witch King. And the king sees it, and it's pretty gruesome. Grabs him, throws him, and the king is flung from his horse, lands on the ground, and he's out for the count. And as the Nazgul on that dragon creature's about, he goes feast on his flesh. Éowyn, no one else does anything for the king. They're all just horrified. Éowyn jumps in front of this thing. That's the red line that I talked about. This is what the heroine does. The red line is here. It's me. I am the shield. I am the line you don't cross, and I am the only enforcer of this line. That's a hell of a thing to present yourself as. That's the stunning phenomenon of the Shield Maiden. And she fights this thing. She lops off the head of the dragon, and then she's got to fight the Nazgul. And he hits her with that mace. She blocks it with the shield, and in the book, her arm is shattered. She breaks her arm, and he's about to take her down. And Mary, the fragile power, activates in the climax of this battle, stabs the Nazgul in the leg. It breaks his attention, and she's able to stab him and kill him. And she has the famous line, no man can kill me. I am no man. And she stabs him in the head, and she kills the Witch King of Angmar. So Éowyn, despite having minimal role in the story or minimal screen time in the story, rises to some of the most heroic aspects of the Heroine's Labyrinth. Big time.
Okay, let me ask you about this, because it's not, when we were writing the Heroine's Labyrinth, or if you're going to do a heroine-centric story where that's going to be your main character, your protagonist, you've got these archetypes that are laid out. We also have in the hero's journey, and that Vogler's laid out. Here are the archetypes and the kind of here we go. But we said that the Lord of the Rings is not a Heroine's Labyrinth story. It's not Éowyn's story.
Correct.
Right? So it's another story. And yet, when we're presented with a feminine hero, Éowyn, she still follows these archetypes. And why is that?
I think
her elements in the story draw from the Heroine's Labyrinth. So that's so interesting. Why is that?
It is interesting. I am still fascinated by all of this myself. No matter how much I pour myself into it, no matter how many stories I look at, it has not gotten old. It is still just as fascinating to me as it was, 5 years ago when I first started to peel this back. I think the reason it occurs is because I think the reason the Heroine's Labyrinth exists is the heroine is essentially the non-warrior role in a society. That's why men can do this too. I am not the guy you want to be sending out to face a dragon. I'll write a song about it. I'll write the story about, but you don't want to give me a sword and a shield and send me. So even as a guy, I'm not your ideal warrior. As much as I wish I was, maybe I'm just not. If I had to, I'll do it. But there are better warriors out there. So I think what happens is in the past, and even today, to a large extent, most of the people who fulfill the warrior role tend to be men. If there's a massive war tomorrow, it'll be mostly men still lining up to fight this war for the United States or in any culture. If China does it, or Iran, or Brazil, it's still going to be mostly men answering that call. Now, you're probably going to get a lot more women than in the past, but it'll still disproportionately be men. And in the past, it has absolutely been disproportionately men for the warrior role. What does that mean? So it means that a lot of women aren't leaving the native culture as in an aggregate sense. So if you're going to write a story and you're passing through Rohan, the likelihood that you're going to encounter Éowyn on the road is less likely than encountering Éowyn inside the king's castle or the hall of Medusel, right? So you might encounter her there. And lo and behold, in The Lord of the Rings, we do encounter her there. So once we encounter her, now we want to know a little bit about her. Even the author, as the writer, you got to know, who is Éowyn? Well, she wants to be a warrior, but she can't. That's the plot. So it immediately starts to manifest itself, because if she wanted to be a warrior and she could, she wouldn't be in the Hall of Medusel. She'd be out there on the rough. But we didn't find her out there. We found her in here. So she's here because the king says, A, we need you here. B, we don't need you out there. And C, it's an honor that you do these tasks close to home. And she fights back. So I think what happens is the second you put her in the center of this labyrinth, the archetypal manifestation follows this path accidentally, versus the hero who, if you're the writer, you're like, oh, he's going to go on this great quest. Well, if that's true, if that's your design for the hero, like Frodo, well, he's going to immediately start to manifest along this other route where the archetypal patterns are just going to be different. Wilderness survival, combat, warrior tropes are probably going to be along that path. You're going to be physically threatened by external, elements or agents regularly. And Frodo is. Éowyn is not. She wants to be, but she's not allowed to be. So I think where you orient your characters begins to plant that seed as to which archetypal design is going to grow out of it. And even then, I think they can shift.
So I wonder if we need a different word than the word that you said there, which was accidental. You said that once you put her in these situations, and then these archetypes and these situations come out accidentally. But if we were thinking that it's something psychological, then that wouldn't be accidental. It would not be. There's a different word I think we should be using. Perhaps it's because it's not. I think we're saying that might not be an accident. That these are not there by accident. Right. But neither were they necessarily deliberately planned. But that these are the emergent characteristics
organically, or
that emerge organically from our psyche when we have characters in these situations. Is that something like that?
Yeah. So I just thought of a great
inherently.
Example.
Okay, Sable says accidental should be inherently.
Inherently might work. Organically, inherently, yeah, because it's not necessarily deliberate. A lot of these characters don't know they're doing it. Sometimes the author obviously doesn't know they're doing it. Because clearly Tolkien just wrote shot from the hip when he was writing, as do most of us. I think organically is a little bit better. So think of a tree. You plant the seed, and I didn't know this, but I found out that the roots, if they come up out of the surface, they start growing bark. If they could start growing smaller limbs and leaves, but if they go underground again, they become just roots and they begin soaking up nutrients. So it's like, if your hero goes above the surface, he's going to start looking more like a tree. If the hero goes under the soil, he's going to start looking more like a root. So I think that's why organically might be a good word, because it is setting the tone for the course based on the trajectory of that root or that limb or that character. Which path they choose will start to have its own archetypal designs along that path, more likely than the other.
MZ also likes organically. I like that.
Okay,
I like that too. That these
inherently is not bad either. I like organically because
they develop organically from what you the seed you planted. It develops from the seed you planted organically.
Yes. Yeah. So I that's why I think I prefer the word organically, because that's how I see it in my head anyway.
So we've got, I know. So I don't understand why we're not dual streaming, although this is on the Geekverse where we could take super chats. But we've got less than 200 watch hours necessary on this channel before we can start taking super chats on the Table Talk channel, and then we'll disconnect it from Heath's Geekverse and we'll be operating with both of these channels. And this stream, the Table Talk show, just on this channel. So we're probably getting close after this stream. We'll see.
Yeah, that's true.
So soon we'll be able to have super chats on this channel soon. If you want to help us out, if you want to help us get there, like go back and watch, like I was saying, that episode 021 with Doug with the Heroine's Labyrinth and stuff like that, and help us get the watch hours on this channel. And you'll get all of Doug's archetypes and things like that.
Sable has elegantly resolved the 2 word choices. 3.
I see. It develops organically because it's inherent.
Because it is inherent. I like it, Sable. That was awesome.
Yeah. So yes, and go. Yeah. Now we can watch all of Star Trek 6. Yes.
And take notes. We'll have a quiz on Star Trek 6 next Thursday.
Yeah, we did tons of that. Okay. We also don't often talk a lot about the Game of Thrones, even though I'm also a big Game of Thrones fan. The books, and I was a fan of the TV show for a while, and I am a big fan of the House of the Dragon. But so let's talk for a moment. Let's excuse me. Let's talk for a moment about the Game of Thrones and the different women characters that show up in that series, and how they may adopt these different archetypes from the Heroine's Labyrinth or may not. What does Daenerys do? How is she fulfilling the Heroine's Labyrinth if she is?
So Daenerys, she does. Excuse me. Let me get some water. Daenerys is awesome, and I would say she's one of the more dominant heroines of the Game of Thrones story. There's a couple very dominant themes with her. One is the sacred fire, and the other is the beast as ally. So, in fact, Daenerys is a poster child for the sacred fire. She has sacred fire symbols that are unmistakable. The 3 dragons. And what's interesting about her sacred fire, who literally breathe fire, and she cannot be burnt. So she is loaded with sacred fire symbolism and language. She's Daenerys the Unburnt. She has all this language built into this. So what's interesting about her sacred fire is as she grows, so does her sacred fire symbols. And as her sacred fire symbols become more dangerous, so too does Daenerys. Now, I want to snip off season 8. It's hard to make sense of it, and I don't like tying in really poor writing to this because it throws off the analysis so much that I would rather not engage with it. Her destruction of King's Landing really doesn't make any sense if you understand her sacred fire. I know they went with the break the spoke, thing, but that's not what drove her. That's not what fueled her. So the other thing about the sacred fire is that it's multi layered, right? The heroine, it revolves around the heroine's individuation. It stems from, continuity wise, the native culture. She inherits the Targaryen bloodline. This is absolutely important to understanding her character. She never forgets the Targaryen worldview, nor her role inside that family. She's the queen, right? I am the queen. I am going to take that throne. So her role, she inherited this role. There is a continuity factor. The Targaryen line was almost destroyed. You're one of the final descendants. It'll never come back without you. Well, she ends up caring about this. This fuels her. And then third, there's a masked minotaur. There are people trying to capture her. There's actually a great episode with the warlock. I think his name is Priet. Correct me if I'm wrong. But he has her drink a poison apple, which is a nightshade. He brings her into a tower, right?
The alchemist guy. Yeah.
Yes, he's the bald warlock. He gives her a poisoned apple. She drinks the nightshade, or the shade of the evening, is what they call it in Game of Thrones.
Pyat Pri, I believe. Yeah, Pyat Pri.
Pyat Pri, that's right. Okay. So, and what does he try to steal from her?
I forget. Actually, I forget.
The dragons, her sacred fire.
Okay, they were trying to get one of the dragons. Okay.
Yeah, I think he tried to take all of them. But he was trying to steal her sacred fire. Okay, a common theme for Daenerys that people are trying to steal her. Yes, the dragons. So she drinks it. She becomes disoriented, which is exactly what the poisoned apple is designed to do. Disorients her, puts her into an altered state. And while she's in that altered state, he chains her. Captivity, another goal of the poisoned apple, to capture the princess or heroine, and then to steal her sacred fire, to extract that from her. And in this case, he takes the sacred fire symbols, which were the dragons. Of course, he doesn't get away with this, but you have a beautiful motif with the Heroine's Labyrinth with Daenerys and her sacred fire. And there are a lot. She uses fire to destroy and to conquer. So that is, I would say, like the dark feminine for her, the use of the sacred fire as a destroyer. She does it in the, I forgot what it's called now, the Dothraki. The Dothraki house where all the women are.
Right. Yeah. At their sacred village and stuff like that, where their house, I forget what that is, but yes, right. Yeah. She burns that. Yeah, she burns that. Right.
So she's got that, and if you watch, there are this sacred stealing her sacred fire is a common. This motif repeats. In fact, there's another poisoned apple. The guys at King's Landing tried to poison her with wine. Remember, there's a wine merchant. He's like, you'll like this one. And I think it's Ser Jorah is onto it.
You're right. Yep. Helps her out there.
Right. And he was going to, I think he was part of the conspiracy and decides to intervene to break up the poisoning of Daenerys. So, you see this repetitive theme with her in a couple of different episodes. However, she also has and this is one that a lot of heroines in Game of Thrones have. The Beast is ally. Daenerys has one of the best in Khal Drogo. He is the ultimate Beast is ally figure. Her, the smaller, white clad feminine character with the large, darker, beastly male masculine character. It's the perfect match for the Beast is ally. And what does the Beast is ally always do? He adopts the heroine's cause. And what about that scene where he pours the gold on her brother's head and he dies, and Drogo gives this impassioned warrior speech about how he is going to get the throne for the queen. He's going to take the iron horses across the salt sea. He's going to or the Dead Sea where you can't survive. And what does he call it?
The wooden horses. The wooden horses, like referring to ships from that. But yeah, they're going to cross the ships.
Yeah,
cross the sea with all the horses. Yes.
He's going to take Westeros. He's going to give her the Iron Throne, and he's going to do this. So Khal Drogo adopts the heroine's cause, and it costs him his life. By the way, he ends up dying. But he's a beast in a pure form. And in the book, I don't talk about this too much on the channel yet, but in the book, you'll see I take the beast as ally to more advanced variants. And one of the variants is the bridal ambassador. So one of the things I talk about in the book that explains the beast as ally is I call it xenopathy. And it's the heroine's ability to identify with an unlike being. And that's why I give it, it's not empathy. It's like, oh yeah, I feel sorry. You feel sorry. I feel that. I get you. I empathize. Or it's not sympathy. Oh, that happened to you. I feel bad for you. This is xenopathy, the ability to build a bridge and to understand someone who is not like you. It's like an alien, someone different, a beast, and to be able to build that relationship. So the beast as ally is a common theme. However, one variant is the bridal ambassador, in which the heroine is married off to a foreign groom. So this dichotomy immediately rebuilds itself, archetypally speaking, as a beast as ally type being. So that's why Khal Drogo is perfect. Not only is he the beast as ally, she's also a bridal ambassador. She's horse traded into this marriage with him in the first season, and she marries him. So she's a bridal ambassador also. The third variant is what I call the female diplomat. It's not a bridal ambassador. It's not a medieval marriage into a foreign groom. It is literally a woman who is an ambassador, like Christian Avasarala in The Expanse. I love her. She's a great female diplomat. But Padme Amidala is another female diplomat. So you get this archetype, and her ability to be able to forge relationships with unlike beings or unlike cultures is this natural phenomenon. There's a book that came out in 2014 called Rise of the Female Diplomat. And I think it's because of this ability in heroines to build these bridges. So Daenerys exhibits some of these traits on the beast as ally frame. Many of the heroines in Game of Thrones follow the bridal ambassador path. Sansa, Talisa marries Robb Stark. And there's this great back and forth with them where she's like, my mother told me about the Northmen, they're stinking barbarians and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, the beast. They're not human. They're beast-like. And another one is famous, Ygritte and Jon Snow. They're not just foreign cultures. They're bitter enemies. Their relationship through Ygritte allows the eventual, not just bridge, but the alliance between the wildlings and the Night's Watch. And, he's called a crow. She calls him Crow, which is another animal totem, I call it. Whatever, crow. So you get this a lot in Game of Thrones. So you do get a lot of these archetypes baked right into Game of Thrones. What's interesting, and this is good advice, I would think, for writers of like TV series or you can repeat the archetypes. You just have to change the expression, and it has to be consistent, I think, with your story. You know nothing, Doug Burton. That's awesome.
Catelyn did that, the bridal ambassador, because Catelyn, she's married to Ned Stark.
Totally.
At the beginning, she did that. Cersei does that.
Remember Cersei's dialogue? She's like, I remember my wedding night, and he was like black bearded and fierce, and her idealized or romanticized version of this of her beast groom. And then he's drunk, he climbs on top of her, and he whispers another woman's name in her ear, and she never forgave him for that. A lot of these characters remember their bridal ambassadorship, and not fondly. It's not always a positive in Game of Thrones.
Going back to Daenerys, how does Khal Drogo's death relate to his role as a beast and ally? Is this a subversion of an archetype? How does that work? And then also, I think Drudenfuzz brings up, I think it could lead into that Jorah, how does Jorah fit into Daenerys' story? Beast as ally, his family heraldic symbol is a bear.
Totally agree. He is a beast as ally. So a beast as ally is someone who adopts the heroine's cause. When Ser Jorah prevented her from being poisoned, he fundamentally changed his mission. Remember, his mission was eventually to see to it that she was killed. He was a gift to her, if I remember right.
Oh,
he changes that. He adopts the heroine's cause, and he becomes one of her most loyal protectors. You know, the idea of the male protector, or not, I shouldn't even say male, masculine protector, the beast, you know, protect the mountain does it to Cersei as a zombie. You know, he's brought into service to protect Cersei around the clock. So Sir Drudenfuzz, you're 100% correct. Ser Jorah is another beast as ally, and he does have an animal totem. You totally pinpointed it. However, one of the things about the beast as ally is that when they adopt the heroine's cause, they do so to the death. Now, luckily, hopefully, the hero or the beast doesn't die. Like Han Solo, he makes it to the end, you know. But Khal Drogo is the beast that pays the ultimate price. He adopts the heroine's cause, and he is killed by a witch before he's able to fulfill this promise. And this throws her entire storyline in a disarray. And I would also like to go back to Catelyn Stark. She also has some dialogue dedicated to her marriage with Ned, but she also has an awesome Shield Maiden moment. I love it. It's in season 1. Bran is pushed out the window, right? By oh my God.
Jamie.
Jesus. He was one of my favorite characters. Anyway, shoves Bran out the window, but Bran survives. Bran's laying in bed, paralyzed, and Catelyn walks in at some point, and there's an assassin in Bran's room, and he has a knife. And as he rears back, Catelyn rushes in and grabs the blade with her bare hand and staves off the assassination attempt. And I'm like, man, the Shield Maiden is a sight to see. They grabs the blade by its hand. This is what I'm trying to say. It's super rational. This is not reason. This is not rational. It's super rational. It succeeded at solving the saving his life. She didn't think about it. She didn't calculate anything. She didn't say, what's the best way to attack this guy? Should I attack this guy? Should I call for help? None of that was registering. She charged in and grabbed this guy's blade, and it ripped open her hand, sliced her hand open. So Catelyn is the Shield Maiden in season 1, and it's awesome.
Okay, I have another one to bring up, but actually let's go here to what James and Sable are talking about, because James asks, what about Tyrion then? House Lannister is a lion, and Tyrion is quite literally treated as a beast throughout the books. But Sable says, I'd argue more than anyone in the Game of Thrones books, Tyrion is the heroine's Labyrinth story. Have you thought about that at all?
You know what? I haven't, but I think that's great analysis, because he's almost treated like he's like a bridal ambassador. You know, he goes to other cultures, other houses, and forges bridges. In fact, that's one of his great abilities, I would say, as a character. However, he's also discarded. He's treated as impish and beast-like. So he's a little bit like Quasimodo or, the Beast in Beauty and the Beast, like a social outcast. So I would have to think about that more. But I would say that he does follow a lot of the patterns of a bridal ambassador, oddly, in his storyline and the way his character plays out. And I'm sure there's more there. I'd have to. That's a great one. I haven't thought about Tyrion in a dedicated sense, but on first pass, I think he does follow the bridal ambassador patterns from an archetypal standpoint.
Okay, let's do one more, but let's do them as a pair then.
Okay,
because I think they go together. How do Arya and Sansa follow the heroine's Labyrinth archetypes, and how do they complement one another? What kind of comments are they making on the feminine condition?
Arya, no, that's a great one. Arya's got some of the best. Sansa's much smaller. She's more of your prototypical. captive maiden, almost like right out of a fairy tale. She's a little bit innocent and naive in the early goings. And she is a bridal ambassador. She is married off to, I believe, Joffrey at one.
Well, no, that's Sansa. Did we say
Sansa? What did I say?
I think we started off. Oh, you said Arya, but that's Sansa.
Sansa.
Yes.
Sansa is definitely the prototypical captive maiden. You know, your typical princess. She's married off to Joffrey at one point, who is very sadistic. Later, she is married off to Tyrion, which, you know, if they're both in the bridal ambassador role, you would imagine, I guess, a better bridge built, but she is not interested in building bridges with Tyrion. She also has I use her as an example of the Black Swan by talking with Cameron and discussing the Black Swan in depth. The idea of heroines being involved with the random forces of nature. Cameron, and I said, I don't know why. I said, the only thing I could think of, and I think these are valid points as well, but that if your arc is in one place in general, eventually something is going to happen to disturb the order in this place. Eventually there's going to be something that sweeps through this area and overturns that setting. That's one explanation. Another is, I believe that heroines are better in tune in general terms with what I would call complex patterns. They're not obvious patterns. And so heroines tend to be very respectful to these complex patterns. That's why I think they trust randomness more than a hero on the journey. And I asked, and by discussing this with Cameron, I was like, why do you think heroines are doing this? Why is there this like focus? Why does this show up so much in heroine-centric stories? His explanation was the monthly cycles for a couple reasons. One, it's a pattern that men aren't focused on. So we're not thinking like that. We're not wired to think in that sort of pattern, that rhythm, whereas heroines are. Two, it's a force of nature. So he's like, that ties into your Black Swan too. So there's this force of nature that is recurrent, and it's a complex pattern, and warrior heroes don't seem to be in tune or aware of it to the same extent. And then thirdly, a woman knows that a heroine knows the minute she becomes a woman on a random day that cannot be predicted on anyone's scale. It comes sweeping in one day and it just happens. And it's a dramatic change because she has different potentiality after she bleeds for the first time. She can now have kids. And this changes everything about her. It changes the way her parents are going to look at her. It changes the danger that men present to her. It changes an awful lot, and it happens randomly on one day. Men have nothing like this. We mature over a slow period of time, if at all, right? But we certainly don't have a single day where it's like, oh, geez, I'm a man now. Now I'm capable of having kids. Now my attitude, my relationship with society changes on this random day. Sansa has this. She gets her. She's not gonna. There's gonna be no danger to her until she flowers. That's what they say in the episode. And one morning she wakes up and there's a blood stain in the bed, and the maids know what this means, and they frantically go to hide it. Like, we're gonna hide this. We're gonna hide this because now she can give birth. Her husband is now going to treat her differently. You know, he's gonna impregnate her. That's the idea. He's gonna create a male or an heir to the throne. And while they're frantically trying to hide this up, another maid passes by, sees it, and goes and runs off to tell on her. So talk about some drama.
Yeah,
this is not going to happen to a male warrior. Now, this scenario is not going to happen. So this is a Black Swan with Sansa. Arya, however, has some awesome stuff. She has a little bit of a mixture. She does leave the native culture and does go on a little bit of a hero's journey because she leaves and she goes out into the wilderness, right? And she has a great beast as ally too. The Hound.
The Hound, yes.
Another beast totem, an animal totem. And these two are terrifying together. So you get the beast as ally motif with her and the Hound, and it's a good one. Literally like Little Red Riding Hood recruiting the big bad wolf in her bed to be like, let's go on an adventure together. So you get that there. And another one is Arya has the poisoned apple issue. She goes into the house of black and white, and she has to drink that poison to become no one, right? A girl, there's all that language, a girl must not have. So what's the problem with becoming no one? The main problem is that you must surrender your sacred fire. The sacred fire is something that matters to you on an individual level, and that also is passed down to you through the native culture, which is her family name. She's a Stark. She can't do it. She actually hides her sword. Sting, right? No.
It's Needle. Needle. Sting is Bilbo and Frodo's sword. you cross the streams.
I knew that.
Needle. Right.
Yeah, Needle. So she hides Needle. She actually doesn't give it up like she's supposed to. So to me, that's symbolic of her hiding her sacred fire. She can't put out the flame of House Stark. She can't do it. That continuous flame, she leaves it as a little ember hidden under the rocks, but she doesn't put it out like she's supposed to. She drinks the poison, and she goes on this whole thing where she becomes blind. And then she eventually rejects this and takes up her sacred fire again. She recovers Needle and I think a gauntlet, and resumes her quest for vengeance. And there's actually a bad line. He says, "Now you've become no one," which is not true. It's the exact opposite. She's become Arya Stark again and definitively. So that was an example of the writer not understanding the archetypal moment to write that dialogue. But anyway, there's some clear archetypal designs in several of the Game of Thrones heroines, and they're all fascinating. But you'll find a lot of Beast as ally, a lot of bridal ambassadors, and a lot of sacred fire issues with the heroines.
If you're writing a story as complex as the Game of Thrones or the Song of Ice and Fire were the books, and we were weaving all these different characters together. Now, arguably, of course, the books haven't been finished yet, and the TV show ended badly. But if you're going to be running a whole bunch of characters, you got a whole bunch of characters that are going on. So you're going to have, I guess this applies to Hero's Journey as well. You got several characters going through the Hero's Journey, and several characters going to be going through the Heroine's Labyrinth. How do you keep the individual stories fresh and interesting as they're weaving together and all being told in the same story, even though they're all sharing the same archetypes and might be archetypically similar?
Well, I think that's really the skill of the writer, because I think most of us would really struggle at telling a story as panoramic with so many points of view as George R.R. Martin. And look, he can't even finish it. Even he couldn't do this ultimately. But I think if you're attempting to do it, my rule is always internalize the archetypes to where you can understand them and recognize them like that. And then throw them in the background and then just be a writer. Have fun with it, like a role player. What's interesting? What's interesting? Oh, this scenario. Write that scenario down. And then as you're rereading it, you might be like, oh shit, this is she's a bridal ambassador. Well, now take that groom and make him as beastly as possible. Make him antisocial. Make him the least likely guy in the world that she's going to be interested in. And then you also have to establish her sacred fire. What does she care about? Because if she's going to reject this guy, even though they're forced together, what is it that she cares about? Because that's what she's going to try to protect in this relationship. She doesn't want to become too much this guy's bride, for example. So you could start playing with those archetypes or the design and get creative with it. I think that's what I like about archetypes is it's like a Christmas tree. You could decorate this thing however you want, and no one's going to do it the same as you. So you get a chance to deck yours out. So if you're going to do a Beast as ally and character A and character B are who you're working with, and you're in setting one, deck it out, like make it as cool as you can. And then if you go to another setting, it's going to be two different characters. So you can have another Beast as ally or bridal ambassador. It's your job to make the alchemy come out totally different. And George R.R. Martin largely does that. I mean, he's very good at mixing characters in a different way and get Shay and Tyrion have that she's a bridal ambassador. A lot of them don't work out in Game of Thrones, which is not normal. Usually that is the adventure. They come together and they blow apart, and then they come together somewhere else and over here. And lot of forced divorces.
Well, this has been fantastic. Are there other things, since we're on your book, is there anything else that we need to cover? Any other heroines? We've covered a lot of heroines in here. We've talked about, on the channel in general, we talked about Sarah Connor. We went to extensive look at Sarah Connor because we did Terminator 1 and Terminator 2, both as their own individual streams and stuff. So you haven't seen that. We talk about the Heroine's Labyrinth with regard to Sarah Connor there in great detail. But is there anything else that we need to cover this evening?
Well, what I'll say, and we could do this on maybe a different stream or something else, and even for others to consider, I thought of 2 examples of stories that you could examine on your own and look for either the hero's journey or the heroine's labyrinth, because I like to think of them as distinctive. I should say I like to. I'm convinced they're completely distinctive. And one way to test it is to look at stories that have both. Where you can easily spot the hero's journey and easily spot the heroine's labyrinth. So this is a fun one, guys. You'll enjoy doing this if you want homework or just the fun exercise of a creative writer or someone who likes this topic. Watch Wreck-It Ralph. Ralph goes on an absolute hero's journey, and Vanellope von Schweetz absolutely stays inside the labyrinth. And it's beautiful how they mix them together. If you want to see a model on how to use both in the same story and appeal to both sides, Wreck-It Ralph is picture perfect for the heroes. Ralph is the hero on the journey, and Vanellope is the heroine in the labyrinth. And Ralph becomes her beast as ally. So you got to watch it. It's textbook. And then 2.
James says, I've never in my life received more homework from a YouTube channel than I have from Heath and the Geekverse.
Well, hopefully it's worth it.
Or always more movies to watch, more things to read, more books to read. Yeah, more, even other YouTubers to go and watch. So,
well, what's funny is I thought I was being invited, Doug, you should come on the channel one day and talk about the Heroine's Life. My homework level has gone through the roof since I've met
you have to be on the show. Right?
So at least we're all in this together. And then the last
number 2,
one,
Wreck-It Ralph, number 2. Yeah.
Yeah. So Wreck-It Ralph is textbook. So easy. It's beautiful. You'll love it. 2, compare the original trilogy of Star Wars to the prequels. The original trilogy is almost, except for the Star Wars. We talked about Leia's snippet of the heroine's labyrinth, but Star Wars, the original trilogy, is the hero's journey. And it's beautiful. It's the model for the hero's journey. But the prequels is a heroine's labyrinth with Anakin in the role of the heroine. So if you look at it through that, you will see all the archetypal designs. You won't see the militant outsider conqueror, but you will find the disguised apex character in the center of the labyrinth. You'll find home as battleground. You'll find all of them in the prequels. But in the original trilogy, you'll find the hero's journey. So the prequels in the original trilogy, 2 other story trilogies to watch and love with the eye on whether you're in the hero's journey or in the heroine's labyrinth. So anyway, for food for thought, right. It's fun to do it just in its own right, at least for me.
So we want to say, I'll bring this up. So Faraway Bird. Oh, there we go. But Faraway Bird, this could be Tuesday.
Oh man, amazing.
Doug's book,
yeah,
Faraway
honestly,
Bird.
Of course, I'm biased, and I want everyone to read it. But I would love it if y'all could read it, because I would just love to talk with you about it. When you write something like this, it is fun to share. So for those of you who will read it, I can't wait to talk to you about it. And I can't wait to hear what you thought about it more than anything.
All right. So that's Tuesday. And you can get the physical book or audiobook. You can download the audiobook immediately while you're cleaning house.
Yes.
Listen to it and see what's going on. Because you did also say that you had custom music for the audiobook.
Yes, there's custom music in there. We place it in certain points in the story. I had written a minstrel song that we actually put a melody to. So it's all in there. Like there's some cool stuff in this book. And I think the narrator does a fantastic job.
Yes, I have been listening to it as I have been reading it. So wait, so what's going on here? Oh, there we go. So the cultists right here. So I'll say on my side of things, we've been working on getting our board gaming coffee shop ready, and we're going to do a test on that next Friday. So we're going to be doing that. So please tune in if you're on the Heath's Geekverse side of things, the Heath's Geekverse channel. We're going to be doing our first test of the board gaming coffee shop, so we can all get together virtually and play tabletop games, board games, role-playing games, that kind of thing. We'll do a small test next weekend, and then after that, maybe in about 2 weeks or whatever, because I'm sure there'll be some things I need to adjust on the system side of things. We'll have our first event, have everybody come in, play games together, and hang out together in a virtual environment. But then basically right after that, homework and now tests. Yes, we're going to be doing a test. That's what's going on. Friday, there will be a test. But then basically, even starting next week on Heath's Geekverse channel, where we're doing the morning grind, I host the morning grind in the mornings. We're going to be talking about game design. We're going to be talking about some creating some games for the Cultists. The Cultists is on its own YouTube channel. The Cultists is my show. It is I'll put that in the chat right here. If you're not subscribed already, please come and check out the Cultist YouTube channel. That is my show. I created it. I co-wrote it and I produced it. Brianna, who will be on the show on Tuesday, she's frequently on the show, is the co-writer with me, and she directed it. I produced it. She directed it. It is our story about modern-day Lovecraftian cultists who just want to worship Cthulhu in a world full of people who don't understand. It is shot in mockumentary fashion. The first 3 episodes are on the show. We got 20 episodes in total. They're all between like 5 and 8 minutes each, 6 and 8 most typically. So the first 3 episodes of season 1 are already on that channel. We're going to be launching this in a big way. I'm turning the battleship from now that I've got the coffee shop just about ready to go. I'm turning the battleship to launch a show over here on
That's awesome.
Cultists. So I hope everybody will be with me for that. Would love to have you. We'll be talking about it more here. We'll be talking more about the Heroine's Labyrinth here, and then also everything that's going on with the Cultists as well as we are.
And any what would you call slug line that says who just want to worship Cthulhu? If that's in there at all, I got to know what's going on. It's such a simple desire.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here, Doug.
Thank you for having me on.
It's two table talks with you in a week, but we need to but your book's coming out, so we got to be on top of things, and we had to have Cameron, so Cameron could do it. So we thank you for coming on and doing 2 with me this week.
Hey, no problem. I appreciate you letting me come on here.
All right, everybody, go forth, read Faraway Bird, get ready. Heroine's Labyrinth, so that's in February. Heroine's Labyrinth, we'll have the links for you here when it's actually available to pre-order in February. If you're watching the channel, you'll know when it's available. So, all right,
awesome,
everybody. I'll see you tomorrow on the Heath's Geekverse channel for the morning grind. We'll be designing a dungeon some more for RPGs. So later, everybody, have a wonderful evening. Go be productive and creative.